Morning, everybody who's joining in. Welcome. Thank you for joining this morning. Just giving you a sound check. We will be starting in a few minutes' time, just admitting a lot of colleagues into the meeting. Talk to you soon. Thank you. Well, good morning to everybody. So great seeing everybody again. We're still admitting people into the meeting. Thank you for joining. It's great seeing all the faces again. And we've been looking forward to another great Transport Forum event. And yeah, proudly hosted today by the South African Association of Freight Forwarders on the 8th of June 2023. Ladies and gents, while we're admitting people, just a little bit of housekeeping. I don't think I need to educate you guys anymore on the Zoom virtual scenario, but just a reminder, please keep yourselves on mute. We will give you opportunity to say, to ask questions and so on during the questions and answers session at the end of the session. And then you're most welcome to make use of the chat room to greet each other, share contact details. Please, in the chat room, keep the discussions focused on the topic of this event. We'll really appreciate that. And yeah, so let's have a look at our program for today. So today we're talking about the logistics network, understanding shared infrastructure, shared responsibility, and shared maintenance. And as I said, it's proudly hosted by South African Association of Freight Forwarders. Ladies and gents, you might have noticed that obviously all the Transport Forum events are complimentary, including the related content on the web, presentations you can download and so on. I'll give you the links just now. So obviously we've got valued associations and sponsors with the Transport Forum that's making this possible already for more than 16 years. And let's give quickly recognition to these associations and sponsors of the Transport Forum. But we're going to have a little bit of fun in this process. And that is, ladies and gents, you can win a prize. There's actually two prizes. You can see this, it's a very nice Bluetooth speaker box. And we're going to hand out two prizes at the end of the sponsors recognition. So what we're going to do is we're going to tell you more about our sponsors, and at the end we will then ask some questions about our sponsors, and the first person answering the question, all right, in the chat room, he or she is the winner of that prize and will have the prize couriered to you. So obviously after the event we'll obtain your preferred delivery address. So let's have a look. Transport Forum is proudly associated by the following professional bodies, and quickly going to have a look at each one of them. So we're looking at South African Association of Freight Forwarders. You can see that's already been established in 1921. So it's a national association with members throughout the Republic of South Africa. And as usual, anybody is welcome to interrupt me if you want to say a few words about this organization. Else I will continue with the information at hand. So our sponsoring and our hosting association today is SAAFF, and you can see they make a major contribution to facilitating trade within South Africa. So their member companies manage over 80% of South Africa's international trade. So very proud of being associated with SAAFF. Thank you very much, SAAFF. Right, we've got the South African Express Parcel Association. So represented the body and voice of the express delivery industry in South Africa. They comprise of member companies engaging the express freight and courier industry. Thank you, SAAFF. And we've got a Road Freight Association. We can see they're saying without trucks, South Africa stops. And they've got slogans. They focus on green, smart, safe, legal, and freight. And obviously, road related, road freight related. Thank you very much, RFA, for your support. Then we've got ARIA, that's African Rail Industry Association. So it's the preeminent body in South Africa representing players in the railway industry, and they're doing great work in terms of third-party access and bringing private and public sector closer to each other. So this is great, and we really appreciate ARIA's work you're doing in your association. Thank you very much. Then we've got the South African Bus Operators Association. So they represent the bus and coach industry in South Africa, and they play a vital role in the social and economic development of our country. It already was formed in 1980 by 5 leading bus companies at the time. Today, SABOA represents about 70% of the public transport bus and coach fleet. So thank you very much, SABOA. We also have media houses. There obviously are many involved with the Transport Forum, but these are informal relations with the Transport Forum. We're looking at Freight News by Freight and Trading Weekly. You see news and features for import and export decision makers. So it's, ladies and gents, you need to subscribe to these magazines, otherwise you're missing out big time. You can see there www.freightnews.co.za. Great publication. We've got Railways Africa. It's the African Continent Specialist Trade and Technical business-to-business online publication covering all aspects of the rail sector, all about rail infrastructure. very important. So you need to stay up to speed with what's happening in the road industry by subscribing to Road Africa's magazine. Creamer Media's engineering news, premier source of real economy news, daily coverage of South Africa's transport and automotive sectors, accurate and timely news, reportage. And they also share a video usually with us. So let's have a look at the video, the weekly update.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Engineering News and Mining Weekly magazine, published on Friday, 9 June 2023. In this week's cover article, Engineering News and Mining Weekly senior writer Simone Litka writes that the African Continental Free Trade Area, or AfCFTA, holds promise for South African exports, but implementation roadblocks remain. While the AfCFTA agreement presents a significant opportunity to access a larger market for South Africa's exports and the local manufacturing sector, the need for extensive work in terms of implementation has been highlighted. The Engineering News features focus on cement and concrete, where infrastructure projects are critical to the sector's growth. Boilers and burners, where a partnership with a German supplier is bearing fruit. And corrosion control, coatings and tribology, where a company expands its industrial solutions through 2 partnerships. The Mining Weekly features focus on a preview of the London Indaba, where the debut of the London Indaba aims to highlight the potential for African mining. And Mining in Mozambique, where opportunities are unlocked through addressing regional issues. This week's business leader is Jan Widerstrom, President and MD of SAAFF. And as this week's cartoon shows, South Africans are known to use humour as a coping mechanism against many of the difficulties they face, but citizens have become decidedly humourless as daily power cuts affect their lives. We hope you enjoy this edition of Creamer Media's Engineering News and Mining Weekly. Be sure to subscribe to the magazine that offers you in-depth news about developments in the real economy by emailing subscriptions@engineeringnews.co.za. Happy reading and see you next time.
Thank you so much, Engineering News. Ladies and gents, we're privileged in having a platinum sponsor with the Transport Forum, SAAFF. SAAFF's been actually part of the Transport Forum since inception. You can see they're leading global software as a service and a big data company for vehicle tracking, fleet management, and insurance telematics solutions. You see they span 6 continents, over 55 countries. So yeah, you're not being tracked by SAAFF, I think we're definitely in danger and not being compliant. So let's have a look at the video they shared with us.
Time management, fleet productivity and driver management remain among the most critical priorities for fleet managers, business owners or anyone managing a fleet of vehicles. SAAFF has innovated further by introducing enhancements to Crystal, the advanced telematics and fleet management platform, delivering an always-on, scalable, flexible and fully customizable experience. All the benefits and features of Crystal remain, with driver management and fleet productivity enhancements, enabling your business, big or small, to elevate business insight with quality data and AI-powered predictions for immediate and productive decision-making. Users can now ensure optimum fleet utilization with daily productivity reports displayed on the Crystal dashboard for easy access. Driver jobs can be scheduled with ideal routes based on traffic data, complete with indicated and mandatory fuel stops based on preferred locations. Delivery locations and addresses can be accessed from the pre-populated drop-down list, further enriching ease of use. Drivers access these assigned jobs from the Crystal application on virtually any smartphone or tablet from anywhere in the world, giving them specific duties, precise locations, optimal routes with real-time traffic updates, and even assigned delivery times, updated in real time based on the predefined routes provided, reducing unproductive idle time. Another exciting addition is that Crystal now features customizable electronic proof of delivery with sign-on glass and photo evidence technology, ensuring safe and digital proof of delivery. Crystal, powered by C-Track, provides enhanced productivity and time management. Get Crystal and have the power to predict.
Thank you, C-Track. What a great product. Ladies and gents, another organization has been involved since inception is University of Johannesburg, the Department of Transport and Supply Chain Management. They've got also the Institute for Transport and Logistics Study of Jackie Walters, Paulina, Naveen Pisa, and them are very much part of the Transport Forum. They've been actually mentoring myself also a lot in terms of our focus areas. So we really appreciate their gold sponsorship of the Transport Forum. We've got Global Trade Solution, a gold sponsor of Transport Forum. GTS, Innovative Solutions, Transforming Global Supply Chain. You can see it's consulting and strategy, software solutions, and specialized services. Thank you very much, GTS. Pegasus, Changing Lives, Changing Worlds. It's a multidisciplinary strategic management consulting group. You can see they focus on cities, climate, energy, resilience, transport, waste, and water. Thank you very much, Pegasus, for your gold sponsorship. Unitron Supply Chain Solutions, innovation, expertise delivered. You can see they're a leading provider of integrated transportation, warehousing, and supply chain-based services to customers with a variety of needs, offering bespoke value propositions in each segment. Thank you very much, Unitrans, for your support. JC Auditors, certification, compliance, and one solution, all in one. So they are a SANAS accredited certification body providing internationally recognized certifications. So much important nowadays to be compliant. Also very much involved in the road transport management system, making sure that you've got safe trucking and freight on road, and obviously bus and passenger services. Thank you very much, JC Auditors. Vite Cargo fulfills the needs of the express cargo industry for daytime and overnight cargo capacity across comprehensive Southern and East Africa footprint. So they're a leading cargo airline, providing express airport-to-airport solutions and related services to the courier and express logistics industry. Thank you very much, Vite Cargo. The 6th of July event this year will also be hosted by Vite Cargo. Thank you, Vite Cargo. So here we've got Asimutech. So you can see they serve sectors, safe city, parking management, supply chain mobility, and public safety. Obviously, for all these sponsors, you can find the links on the Transport Forum website. So they offer smart supply, smart parking, smart security, smart kiosk, and hardware solutions. Thank you very much, Asimutech, for your gold sponsorship. Really appreciate that. Easy Clear, software solutions for customers clearing freight forwarding and logistic providers covering air, sea, road, and rail. You can see they are the leading software provider for the customs and clearing industry. Thank you very much, Easy Clear, for your gold sponsorship. Ticket Pro Travel, ladies and gentlemen, a very convenient online booking tool for all your corporate booking needs. You can see the online corporate traveling booking tool with everything you need and nothing you don't want. So they say no contracts, no hidden fees, just good business with straightforward fair pricing. So yeah, Traveler Protector, Business Guardian, cutting edge innovation. Yeah, you're welcome to visit their site. Thank you very much, Ticket Pro, for your gold travel. Still the same group, we've got Ticket Pro Smart Tap. So this Smart Tap solution includes key features like comprehensive route management, flexible passenger payment methods, flexible route and fare product setup, shift and dispatch management, cashier system, inspection tools, and comprehensive MIS reports, management information systems reports. Thank you, Ticket Pro Smart Tap, for your gold sponsorship. Sutari, you can see their slogan is Impact Engineer. That's Sutari, Impact Engineer. Consulting engineers of note. Also many years already a gold sponsor with the Transport Forum. Thank you very much, Sutari, for your gold sponsorship. Cuba, they transforming ticketing as part of the ICA Mobility Group, which enables public and private transport to move into the digital era. And you can see it's journey planning, smart ticketing, streamlining electronic payment, shaping the digital transformation of the mobility sector. So they say the ticketing solutions have been successfully implemented in over 100 cities and regions worldwide, dealing with millions of daily transactions. So they understand and know mobility. Thank you very much, Cuba, for your gold sponsorship. Standard Bank, more than 160 years of experience. They believe that dreams matter and that together we can make them a reality. So they operate in more than 20 countries, did you know that? In Africa and abroad. Our worldwide presence consists of an integrated suite of end-to-end wealth management services and banking solutions. Thank you, Standard Bank, for your gold sponsorship. So, ladies and gents, let's give a big hand to our sponsors. And it's now time for our quiz. And so you should now go to the chat room. There's our sponsors. And I'm going to ask 2 questions. And the first person in the chat room answering the question right will be the winner of that specific prize. All right, so let me just sort my screen out here for me. All right, so the first question is, there's a sponsoring company and their slogan is Impact Engineers. Who are they? You see, there's a lot of answers already. Devlin Naidu. Devlin Naidu, well done. You winner of this one. Devlin Naidu. Let me just make a note here. Thank you, Devlin. Well done. We will pull your prize to you. All right, then here comes the second question. Which association was established already in 1921? Yes, you fast. All right, turn to me. Quilby Heyman was the first one. Look, yeah, Quilby, congratulations. You're the winner of the second prize. Quilby Heyman. And it was SAAFF, South African Association of Freight Forwarders. That was great fun. Thank you very much, guys, and congratulations to our winners. We will have the prizes couriered to you. Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gents, just a reminder again of our business directory. Very popular, very well categorized. It's been outsourced as a BE initiative to the consultants. Olga Mashilu, there is a number. It will cost you only 450 rands per year to have your company listed here. And the feedback we're getting is the companies are getting very well good exposure through this business directory. And also after this event, you will also receive an email and there will be opportunity for you to indicate whether you want Olga to get in contact with you to have your company listed. She also invoices the companies straight. So it's a invoice for the business directory. And so, yeah, take a picture of the screen. There you've got Olga's number. You want to contact her straight directly, or you can respond on our email. Thank you very much, Olga, for the admin you're doing there. So, ladies and gents, the presentations, the Transport Forum presentations will be uploaded to our website, actually, to where all the presentations over 16 years have been uploaded. There are more than 900 of them, which you can download complimentary. And that's the website, transportseek.com. And so you need to log in to access the presentations. To the left of your screen, when you go to the website, you'll see there's a user login. Should you not know what your user login and password is, and you need to create a new account, complimentary, obviously, you can go and you can click on sign up. And then you go through the simple little process where you register, create your own user login details, your username and password, and the system will then send you email to confirm your email address, that normal stuff. And then you can log in. And once you've logged in, you go to events and you select downloads. And the screen nowadays is a little more populated, but still the same functions. Events, downloads. Once you have downloads, you create a very simple but powerful search engine. And there are two ways you can search to download presentations after you've logged into the website. The one is that you can, in the top field, you can type in a title or a description or a guy's surname or whatever. You type in there in the top field and you hit search, and it will bring up everything related to that the topic or sermon or whatever you type in there. And it obviously searches through all 900 presentations presented over the 16 years. Or you can go to category and you can select the date of the event, hit search, and it'll bring up all the presentations presented on that day. So very convenient, very powerful, and you're most welcome to make use of this. And let other people know that they subscribe to the Transfer Forum and be able to access this knowledge base. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, that brings us back to our program for today. So we're talking the logistics network, understanding shared infrastructure, shared responsibility, and shared maintenance. And we've been proudly hosted today by Dr. Unita Maria, she's the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Association of Freight Forwarders. And she's going to do the welcome and keynote address for our South African corporates and non-negotiable. Unfortunately, last night she had to rush off or make arrangements. She flew this morning. As we speak, she's sitting in the aeroplane. So she made effort and she actually did a recording for us. So I'm going to play the recording she forwarded to us last night. For her presentation, she's apologizing she can't be with us in person this morning. But let's have a look at the presentation she shared with us last night.
Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, Harry. Warm greetings from SAAFF. My name is Unita Maria, and I'm the CEO of SAAFF. I must apologize for not being present with you. I was requested to be present at an important event in Cape Town, the establishment of logistics cluster in the Western Cape. At the last minute, fortunately, technology allowed us to circumvent these challenges, and hence we decided to do a recording of the presentation. Nevertheless, I hope you had a wonderful Transport Forum meeting, and I prepared 11 slides for the audience, which is an important message of understanding shared infrastructure, shared responsibility, shared maintenance in our logistics network. In the recent times, there have been a significant focus on our logistics network and the need for collaboration between all stakeholders, both from private sector and public sector. We only have one network, so we need to solve the challenges presented in our network together. And starting off the presentation, I begin with this quote: "Logistics is a science of process and the art of problem solving. It is about balancing cost, efficiency, and customer satisfaction in a constant changing environment." So in South Africa, we need to balance the cost, the efficiency, and the satisfaction in a constant changing environment through problem solving. So today, we hope to resolve some of the logistics network problems, which make our program title, Understanding Shared Infrastructure, Shared Responsibility, and Shared Maintenance, very pertinent. What are the current challenges? Lately, we've been very clear on the challenges presented. They have been discussed on several forums and can collectively group under three main pillars, which is infrastructure, equipment issues, road rail capacity. Despite the fact that there are different pillars, they are very much interlinked, and we call them multimodal, and all impact on our ability to move the goods in and out of the country, something which is crucial for the success of South Africa. However, we do not want to sound like a broken record and repeat the same negative narrative, as this narrative has causal effect on our ability to overcome our challenge. And for that, we need to focus on providing collective solutions to these challenges. Are we all use the same infrastructure and have the same responsibility and influence on success? Need all modalities? For sure. Load, distance, speeds, relationships. Several modalities satisfy the demand for moving goods from one place to another. These modalities have different characteristics in terms of load, distance, and speeds, and depend on the interplay between these factors, and we need them for the customer. One will choose one modality over the next. Despite the different characteristics, these modalities are very much linked to each other. Oftentimes, one complements the other one instead of being a substitute. And in South Africa, our freight demand is very high. At some 500 billion ton kilometers, and our economy hub, which is Gauteng, and our major geographical areas of economic activity centration, such as iron ore line, the coal line, manganese, agricultural. Therefore, suited far from our ports, which ship the majority of the goods, we cannot rely on one modality to satisfy the freight demand. We need all these modalities to work in unison to balance the problem-solving aspects of our current challenges. Furthermore, we must stay customer-centric, as the customer is the end user of the logistics network, and without them, the logistics network will not exist. However, in the case of SA Inc., the global marketplace is our customer, and we need to align with our customers. What will bring the change, as we think, is a dynamic alignment model, as done by Professor John Katona. The core concept in an organization is that you need to align with your operational environment. The alignment will show the interaction between the customer needs and the formation of the appropriate strategic responses, and the success in executing these strategies. And the key of the dynamic alignment lies in sharpening the culture of our logistics network. And that culture is a collective culture. No more is it isolated, but it's collectively. What does that mean for our logistics network? In the country that collaboration is the key, it's no longer the government or the private sector. It needs to be a collective culture to fight for SA Inc. However, to align the culture, we have to align the different behavior forces of all the role players in the extended logistics network. Behavior forces at play in individual and groups, as you probably know, is normally the force to analyze, systems and control, which refer to the administrator, a force for cohesiveness, cooperation, and relationship, which refer to the integrator, a force for creativity, change, flexibility, which refer to development. Then the last one, which we like, is the force of energy, action and results, which refer to the producer. These forces work in unison. One behavior pattern is not more important than the next one, as the network can only function with all the elements working together. In our network currently, these forces are a bit jointed. We need to get the culture correctly so that we can understand what does it mean to operate in a shared infrastructure with shared responsibility and a shared maintenance. Knowledge funnel in the design thinking with a behavior structure. We all know that supply chains are very complex. Indeed, supply chains is a complex network of interconnected activities, processes, organizations, and resources that are involved in the production, distribution, and delivery of goods and services to the end customer or consumer. It encompasses various stages such as sourcing, manufacturing, transport, storage, and customer fulfillment. The complexity of supply chain arises from numerous factors, including the global operation, multiple stakeholders, the diverse product portfolio, regulatory requirements, the market volatility, demand fluctuations, and the need for cooperation amongst different entities. Managing these complexities requires the effective communication, collaboration, strategic planning, risk mitigation, which is dear to my heart, and the use of advanced technologies to optimize the process, minimize disruptions, because supply chains cannot work with the disruptions, and ensure timely and efficiency delivered to meet the customer expectations. And the customer expectation can only be achieved if we funnel all the complexity of our ever-changing environment in a concept of a roadmap that will make sense for all its users. And fortunately for SA Inc., a roadmap is being developed by Operation Vulindlela team in the President's Office. Furthermore, considerable progress has been made in advancing a joint action between business and government in the transport and logistics space. We must stabilize and improve operational performance on the key trade corridors, mobilizing private sector resources and accelerate the implementation of the logistics, or let's say, of the national rail policy, and close the capacity gap, as we discussed earlier in the load, distance, and speed factor. Unfortunately, work is underway to immediately align and integrate business efforts into the government's freight logistics roadmap and urgently enable development of the work plans, the deliverables, and the timelines, while also integrating the private sector into a recently formed National Logistics Crisis Committee, NLCC. Only through collective efforts can we achieve success in the logistics space in South Africa. How will we achieve success? Through a fundamental approach typified by transparency, collaboration, big data analytics, and a mature private sector participation module in our logistics network. Practical examples, what we should look like is, or look at, what will success look like? How can we practically achieve our targets? I will not read through all the practical examples, but rather highlight a few. Nevertheless, with the key works, the audience can see what action will achieve success. Some changes included alignment, the medium and the long-term asset capacity with the industry commitment growth plans, the rehabilitate of our rail network, and continuing acceleration of the civilians' technical efforts and private security to prevent sabotage, as we know, and theft of assets. Develop a framework under which terms and conditions of the rail access practically enable investment into new trains and capacity. Utilize technology and development, a holistic perspective of the supply chain by using or leveraging big data capabilities. Develop and publish a concrete implementation plan for the national rail policy and perform maintenance and upgrades to our crucial assets currently facing a backlog. These are some of the main examples, but nevertheless, all fall within the pillars mentioned earlier, which include infrastructure, equipment issues, and the railroad capacity. How will such an infrastructure or shared infrastructure with shared responsibility play out? Simple, logistics performance. On a shared infrastructure with shared responsibility, it's underpinned by several key aspects like, as we all know, cost, time, resilience, and sustainability if all players or all role players work together for SA Inc. In the extended logistics network, we will be able to achieve success and rapidly improve logistics performance, something which is key to the success of the country. Improve logistics performance increases the efficiency in trading by reduced time cost to trade, which could then result in an increase in the volume of trade and ultimately spill over to the economic growth, which we all need, and social development, because we cannot leave labour or the social compact behind, and make South Africa a preferred destination in the global marketplace once again. Some inefficiency currently mean that rail underperformance alone constrained in the year 2022, economic growth in 2022 by 5.3%. Inefficiency cost the economy, and that's an estimation of 46 billion in indirect and direct costs. Lack of investment means that we require at least 200 billion in investment. Fortunately, the investment can quickly spill over into sustainable economic growth and create at least, estimate, 55,000 jobs in our rail and port sector alone. And as mentioned throughout, we need a collective approach to achieve success for SA Inc. Transnet and the government cannot go at it alone. Our current ports and the rail model is archaic compared to the international standards at best, failing the country's socio-economic growth and development goals. Therefore, South Africa desperately needs a public-private partnership growth model, which can create jobs, attract the most needed investment in the sector and economy. This is necessary for SA Inc. We need to strive for excellence and get much closer to the world best practice. The recent World Bank CPPI, although widely contested with a methodology that many economic actors did not agree with, showed that we are far removed from the current world best practice. Some modalities are performed better than others. However, all the modalities can improve and contribute to the success of South Africa's logistics network. For rail, the key is network density. The problem of cable theft will disappear when there are 47 trains moving up and down the corridor or the container corridor, as was previously the case. Currently, the general freight level is severely below the global averages and in terms of rates, reliability, travel time, density, utilization. Fortunately for rail, there are some silver lining as we have a high efficiency dedicated export lines, as you know, coal, iron ore line. However, they are not operating at optimal levels because of various constraints. For the road, we are currently experiencing good performance. However, the current state is unsustainable. We have too many trucks on the road. We need to move the rail-friendly cargo currently on our roads back to rail. Too many trucks are on the road, as I explained, due to the lack of rail capacity, which means that the excess number of trucks is causing damage to the infrastructure. For air, we are limited by our global capacity because of the fact that we are far from the global market and currently economic realities, including a weak rand and a high fuel price with no subsidy for local natural resources, are inhibiting growth in this sector. For the ocean, our shipping lines, or our shipping is generally competitive. However, recent port efficiency had decreased across the matrix, including shipping turnaround time, container handling, and working hours. And maybe I can add booking system. For the pipelines and conveyor belts, we are similar to the global levels. We move around about on the conveyor belt 5 to 6.8 meters per second. However, we need these two modalities further to talk to the need for multimodal approach. Ultimately, if we share our infrastructure and responsibility for our network and close the gap between our current performance and global best practices, we can unlock rapid growth potential for SA Inc. and boost our GDP immensely and create sustainable jobs which will further spill over into the economic growth and development. My last slide. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you this important forum, which Harry runs effectively, and we adore him for continuously call us every Thursday to listen to the logistics network. Together, I look forward to engage with you in driving positive change for our country. As such, I leave you with this quote of Steve Jobs. Great things in business are never done by one person. They're done by a team of people. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Unita, and thank you very much for the kind words. But I can actually echo that to yourself as well for the support you and the beautiful work you're doing in this industry. We really appreciate the work you're doing with SAAFF and in the industry. So thank you very much for the presentation. Ladies and gents, should you feel you want to pose questions for Unita, then you're welcome to do that in the chat room, and we will then make sure that the questions reach her and that she can then respond to your questions, she or the SAAFF team. So thank you very much, Unita. Thank you very much for hosting us today. So ladies and gents, then let's take it now a little bit further to our next presenter. And this is Mr. Glenn Stein. He's the project manager for Port of Cape Town Logistics, the Western Cape government. And Glenn is going to talk about challenges and opportunities in our logistics network. Thank you. Thank you very much, Len.
Hello, Harry. Am I audible?
Yes, Len, good morning.
I'll just put my camera on for a moment and then I'll turn it off. And Harry, I'm going to ask if you wouldn't mind flighting that presentation of mine, please.
Okay, just give me a moment then, Len.
And while you get it up, Harry, I'd like to greet everyone online and say, yes, indeed, UNITA expressed all our appreciation for you as well. And I think you intuitively sensed the importance of logistics before most of us did. I think there may be a sense in which the country was found napping on logistics, but thanks to people like yourself and SAAFF, I think we are catching up. And I think what Junita was saying about that National Logistics Crisis Committee is hugely encouraging. And I think I read last night that some CEOs have also committed to assist, to contribute to getting the fluidity up in our logistics chain. So colleagues, Junita and I didn't compare notes before the time, but there are many themes of what I'm going to say that are consistent with what Junita said. Harry, could you just give me a thumbs up that everything's clear on the
Everything is clear. We
cool.
can continue. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then, so when we speak of logistics networks, I think my focus is essentially going to be on a particular logistics chain. And I'm going to focus very much on the container logistics network as it manifests in the Port of Cape Town and in the hinterland from origin to destination, and the reverse on the import side. So thank you, Harry. Then I will just take you very quickly through the journey. We'll be talking together 6 stages in our journey. I'll just touch on the direct correlation between economics and trade and logistics, and then just stop for a minute on a very broad macro map of what this container logistics chain looks like, and then share some thoughts about how we would develop that network. In a sense, it's almost like a cluster, if you like. And then one of the interventions to develop the network that we've been doing in partnership with SAAFF and with CRICMA, which is our dashboard, our logistics dashboard. And then I thought I would begin to end off our journey with a quick summary on where we stand now in this particular logistics chain and how we see the way forward. So Harry, if that's okay with you, those will be the 6 main points in this conversation that we'll have. So this slide, the illustration on the left is the front page of the latest UNCTAD review of maritime transport. UNCTAD, everyone in the room will know, is the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development. So there are several institutions like those that produce incredibly useful research and data and policy advice that is most applicable to the logistics space. And what I thought, for the purpose of today's conversation, of just touching on, and I actually wish Jacob would rather take this part because it's his expertise, but so colleagues, there's a very direct correlation between the economy and trade and logistics. So as an economy grows, and you'll find evidence for what I'm saying in documents like the UNCTAD Maritime Review, as an economy grows, it generates more cargo. There's almost unimaginable to have economic growth without growth in trade. And growth in trade in the Western Cape manifests very much in the container space and in the marine space. 80% of our cargo is shifted by sea. And if we had time, it would have been fascinating to show you how when container technology started in roughly the 1960s, what an incredible impact that had on trade volume growth and on economic growth. So the interesting observation for the purpose of this morning is that this causality, this direction of causality from the economy to trade to logistics, actually in an amazing way works in the opposite direction as effectively. So by engineering effective logistics and creating functional logistics institutions, an organization or a country or a region can stimulate trade. And by stimulating trade, it can promote economic growth and job creation. In fact, the analytics we did in the Western Cape is that a 10% growth in trade could translate to approximately a 1% growth in the economy and a 6% increase in job creation. So 10 takes you to 1, and that 1 takes you to, in fact, if you get the sums right, it's 0.6, but that's the relationship between economics and trade and containers. So if we look over the past 2 to 3 years, there was the massive COVID-induced logjam in logistics, and then the spring unwound in 2021, but the pendulum swung so far that the logistics system couldn't carry all the cargo that wanted to move. So almost every tub that could float was on the water, and leading to all sorts of bottlenecks and knock-on bottlenecks in the system. Container schedule delays doubled, and looking forward, trying to unwind all those bottlenecks, most CEOs will tell you, and taking from what Junita has just shared on the National Crisis Committee, the focus now is to improve resilience in our logistics chains. You'll find every conversation of every company that has a logistics interface, and that means almost every organization in the economy. Those CEOs and those CFOs stay awake at night about how to ensure that there is stock in their warehouses without costing too much, considering all these logistical challenges we have. So how to bring resilience into the chains, what indicators to use, and how information management can contribute to that improved resilience, which is largely what I'm going to be showing you, the direction we're taking in the Western Cape with this container logistics chain. Thanks, Harry. So from here, I thought, let me just give you a very macro map of what this cluster, if you like, looks like, this container logistics chain in the Western Cape. It would start at the very left with where the cargo originates, if we just begin on the exporter side. So there's one little node on the picture, but inside that you have fruit exporters of all sorts, apples and table grapes and citrus, and you have wine producers, and you have frozen fish. So inside that little image is a massive ecosystem itself, and then the other, that's about 50% of our exports, and the other 50% is a whole bunch of smaller commodities. And all of that needs to find its way to a pack house or a cold store or a distribution center. And once again, in that picture, you could unpack it into a fascinating ecosystem of what we might call Pareto stores, your biggest ones, probably less than 10 that keep 80% of the cargo that goes for export. And it's important to know where they are and to know what volumes go through them. And then as soon as cargo is ready to be packed, it needs an empty container that has to come from a shipping line. From there, moving into the port, with the terminal operators. Two of them in Port of Cape Town belong to the Transnet family. But as you know, we have the FPT private terminal as well. And happy to see they're doing really good business at the moment with the citrus exports. And then obviously the container needs to get onto a ship. And there would be roughly 6 major shipping lines that run the trade routes that are served from Cape Town. And they would be the ones that need to get the empty container to the pack house. And there's a whole bunch of logistics dynamics just in that small subcomponent of the logistics chain that Jakob and I are trying to understand better. And then the whole chain moves in the reverse for importers back up to the pack houses and the distribution centers. I'm hoping not to spend too much time on this slide, Harry, but I thought it's important just to understand that there's an umbrella over this cluster, which is a whole range of different national government departments, from the presidency. You heard what Unita was saying with the managing the crisis committee and Operation Vulindlela, through to public enterprises, through to Department of Transport, our ports regulator. Very big implications for Department of Finance, even of Trade and Competition. So finance with SARS and with customs management. And then on the flank, your provincial government, which would be ourselves and our Department of Agriculture, assisting on the grower side in particular. Our Department of Mobility, my colleague will be speaking in a minute on road to rail. And then the platform of all of that, which is our metro and district and local government, because this logistics chain stretches far beyond the Port of Cape Town. It goes right to farm, whether it's in the Cape Winelands or the West Coast District or even in the Overberg, and how the functionalities at local government level impact very directly on the functionality of this logistics chain. And on the right flank, how we endeavor to manage via industry associations. SAAFF is a perfect example of that, how we can engage with the logistics ecosystem via a particular organization, SAAFF, and the same is necessary with our chambers of business and with our transporter associations, for example. And then, so the idea is that by managing this logistics chain or this network, we engineer economic growth, we engineer job creation. And as we optimize this logistics chain or this network, we develop our own maturity to replicate it into more and more logistics chains. One can imagine on the import side or even on the export side for grain. But Harry, let me move on, because this slide alone, we could probably spend our 20 minutes on. So I thought I would just take you on our little journey. The past 4 years, we started with a stakeholder conference. This was the very first one when Mpumi was still our port manager. And we realized that there was an institutional vacuum above the logistics chain, above the network. We realized that there was no integrated strategy. There may have been strategies in the different nodes at different levels of excellence, but the chain defaults to its weakest link. And one of the really weak links were how truck services are managed, because you saw from the previous slide that's transporters that almost form the glue between every one of those nodes in the network. So we've come far from since then. At that session, we formulated 12 priorities to focus on, and data management and logistics dashboards was one of them, to create a platform for collective management, I think is the point that Unita was making. Thank you, Harry. We can take the next slide. And I thought I would just share with you very quickly some of the research that we did emanating from those 12 priorities. Deeper dive on transporter congestion, understanding what this logistics chain looks like from a cargo and a freight management perspective, even understanding the wine exports as a critical commodity for us, and then having a sense of what is the economic impact of this particular logistics chain. Harry, then I'll just share with you perhaps two of those just very quickly. So if you take me to the next slide, I thought you may be interested in seeing how we are beginning to understand our cargo and how the cargo moves. And you'll see massive fluctuations from month to month, which is an operator's nightmare because you need to have equipment for the peaks, and some of that may be idle in the troughs. And operational efficiency and lean management and logistics management prefers a more even flow. And if you look at the composition of those monthly cargo types, the brown at the bottom is the very perishable type of cargo, your grapes and your peaches and your plums that cannot afford to sit in the stack for longer than a day. And some of the manufacturing cargo may be less sensitive to time, but unfortunately, the dotted line, which is the impact of weather, you'll see how massive the impact is in the first 3 months of the year, which is exactly when the cargo peaks. And then we have a bit of a respite, although the climate seems to be quite upside down now. We're sitting in May, June, and we're having a severely disruptive weather. And this may be an interesting slide for our colleagues for a deeper dive as we unpack that. It gives us opportunity for more efficient and more fluid cargo management, but that's a conversation for another day. What we do know, though, we have evidence that this cargo has the potential to grow by 26% in the next 5 years, which is what I'd like to show you in the next slide. So currently, this particular logistics chain, containers through Port of Cape Town, contributes in the order of 72.5 billion rand to gross value added in the Western Cape, and it sustains 225,000 jobs. These are all the direct and indirect jobs related to moving cargo in containers through the Port of Cape Town and its container terminals. We even know how much tax is paid from that, which becomes the basis for an argument of what can justifiably be expected as a public sector investment to increase those taxes. You'll see in the table below, there's a potential for that tax payment to increase by 2 billion rand. So it would make sense to invest 2 billion as the outer side of the envelope from Treasury to get 2 billion back, or anything up to that level. And so I have a high and a low growth scenario. Potentially, if we can realize that 26% growth, we take the GVA generated by this logistics chain to 75 billion. We take jobs to 240,000. We take remuneration paid to the employees to 32 billion. So we create 20,000 of those 50,000 jobs that you, Anita, raised, we can create in this one logistics chain. If we replicate that chain, we can go beyond the 50,000. So colleagues, this becomes our rallying call. This becomes the outline of the strategy that we would want to mobilize commitment towards to ensure we reach the high growth scenario. If we don't bring leadership to achieving that, then the logistics and economic activity defaults to, it's sad to say, a muddling through type of a scenario, which is the default low growth, which is absolutely not where we are hoping to go. So Harry, then just the next slide, please, is how we beginning to manage getting to that high growth scenario. And one of them is the logistics dashboard that SAAFF and Crickmay is assisting us with. Harry, why don't you just give me a sense of how much time I have left? I didn't check my watch when I started.
You still have 20 minutes.
Oh, is that
We're
right?
running-
So,
Yeah, we're
so I've
running ahead of time. So it's
so it
fine.
means I've just started. Cool. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the overview of the dashboard. So to the left is almost like a table of contents, if you like. So that little label, Western Cape Container Terminal Performance, will be changed. This, I'm sharing with you the pilot project. We launched it and decided that although we crawl before we walk and we walk before we run, it's better in the crawl stage where we still are to share with users, get their input, and then capture that input into the development phase. This has just been released to the day a month ago, and we are now in conversation with Yonita and her team and with Creekmay about how to take this dashboard to its next level. So whatever I'm sharing with you, please see it as work in progress, but we believe it already has enough value to be placed in the public space, with obviously with server limitations that come with it, and to build on the positive, hopefully constructive feedback we will be getting. So our first slide then is an overview, and CTCT is Cape Town Container Terminal. Ultimately, we'd have to have all the terminals, and then there's a second slide, which is a picture on live vessel movements on that particular time. You'll see there's no, we can go back, Harry, just let me just take us through the table of contents, if you don't mind. And then very useful history on port movement. So this dashboard will not only have application in terms of planning the cargo you want to take into the terminal for the next day or the next week, but incredibly useful for the data scientists in our midst and those of a more data analytical mindset, because the history that's in here is just absolutely amazing to begin to look at correlations between variables. I'll show you in a minute. And the same applies to some of the stack data we've got, the container move data. There's a bit on port productivity that I'm not going to share with you today, but it begins to help us to develop a conversation about the areas where we can improve. And then behavior beyond port is where Kelly and the guys on the development team are helping us to see what's happening with the trucks, even in the port precinct, the heavy motor vehicle congestion and incidents, and then an incredibly powerful perspective that we have data on, but that still needs to find more expression in how we manage logistics, is to accommodate the impact of weather and have contingency plans for that, ending off with a draft pulling everything together. So the overview is this front page. It gives you your left image at the top, gives you a sense of what is happening right now. The screenshot I took 2 days ago, so you would see that vessels now are just slightly under 2 days waiting to berth. And there were on that day 2 at outer anchorage, 2 at inner anchorage, so 4 vessels waiting and 3 at berth. And on the image below, you can see them. And if Kelly or Elisa, they probably are in the room, they would show you that you could hover on those images and then get incredibly useful detail on each vessel, even the size of the vessel. And then in the middle image, we get some very useful stack information, and we even get total turnaround time of the vessel. And as we move to the right, we are starting to get a window on what's happening in the truck space and the truck turnaround space. And we're hoping to give a stronger voice to our transporters. We do have a sense that they may not have had an equal voice at the table in conversations about logistics, and yet they're an incredibly critical member of the logistics team, as per Unita's last quote. And then also a very useful little window on weather going forward. And I've seen how I just locked it on Wednesday when I took the screenshot yesterday, but it normally gives you a week ahead. And I've noticed how effective that wind speed information is in understanding when there's a risk for terminal to go windbound. And then right at the bottom, it may not be as visible on the screenshot, is a date slide. So you could select the period you'd be wanting to do your analysis on. Harry, I'll just share the next slide. I think I've added 3 screenshots just on the dashboard. So here becomes some incredibly useful stack analysis. So what the top image would show us is the relationship between waiting time to berth and what happens in the stack. And it needs a good data analytic mind to go and unpack, but you will see very clearly that the longer the vessel sits outside to wait, the greater the impact on the stack ultimately, because the stacks are built expecting a vessel to berth at a certain time to unload that stack. But similarly, the longer vessels wait outside to berth, the more bunching it is, and the more stack bunching is created on the offload side. And then there is what you'll see on the right, the history that we have, and even by stack type. So as we're 3 weeks into the citrus export season now, you'll see a huge emphasis on the reefer stack. And you'll see how we are almost beginning to move to a point where the reefer stack is so full that it's generating its own inefficiencies in terms of managing cargo fluidity. And then the bottom graph gives us a different perspective on the impact of stack types and stack levels on transport movement. And if we had enough time to unpack this, it would help us in terms of how we manage the container terminal order issuing to the transporter. Because the minute the transporter is in the terminal, that clock starts ticking. So it would be far better to manage the instruction to the transporter into the terminal according to the optimum time when the stack is ready for that transporter to load or offload. And we're not there yet, but the data is already mature enough to help us to get very close to that. We can go to the next slide, Harry. And this gives us a bit of a deeper dive on the container moves itself. And you will see the seasonality on the top left I was talking about. Once again, you have the slide rule to select a date. The shorter you make the date, the less you'll be able to get a perspective on months, but that's also useful sometimes to have a micro perspective, even down at a daily level. So you will see the relationship between moves across the quay and stack occupancy, or stack the level, how full a stack is, which is essentially what the stack occupancy definition is about. And to the right, the same perspective, but just looking at it from average days of the vessel at berth. And you'll see it's quite fascinating, but quite obvious as you move to the right of that image, that the shorter the time at berth of a vessel, the higher the movement of the container volumes, which is where we want to be. So there's an incentive in the entire logistics chain to turn the vessel around as quickly as possible to get as much cargo moving as possible. And you'll see almost all the international congestion watches, the port congestion watches like Linalytica, would pick those metrics up immediately and flash where a port is on the Linalytica port watch. So as soon as vessels begin to bunch before they berth, it means there's so many more containers that should have been offloaded and loaded, even containers still sitting on that vessel waiting to berth, which is then clogging up the logistics chain. And that manifests in the listing of a port on the front page of that Linalytic cargo congestion watch. And your port even gets flagged on the map, which is where nobody wants to be. And then we take the same logic down on an analysis of container moves and truck and rail movements within the stack by week. And so that analysis gets translated the bottom right, and we look at correlations between truck moves in different zones in the port precinct. So Duncan Road is the one access point, and Marine Drive is the other access point. And so we can begin to unpack until we get to a root cause of congestion for trucks, even on a particular route, and begin to optimize that. Then we can go to the next slide, Harry. So this gives us a sense of how we're beginning to look at transporter congestion. So the red dots on the left on the map shows where those congestion points are. Obviously, that's on the road side. This is about a 3-kilometer radius around the port precinct. And it begins to give us a sense, and it's fairly consistent, about where the delays are in which zone. And it gives us that incredibly rich history as well. And the window that we have right at the top left, where the little truck is, enables you to go either deeper or more narrow in terms of the amount of data or the history of the data you're looking at. And some analytics, some variables we're comparing and identifying at the bottom of that map where the hot spots are, which particular zones are the ones where the congestion occurs the most. So this enables us then to even work with Metro Police and ask them to increase their patrols where the hotspots are, in case it is accident related, or in case it is crime related, or in case it's just trucker behavior related. So some of those congestion issues can be managed simply by a better traffic management. Others might need a change in the signage for truckers. Some may even need a slight change in the road infrastructure, the angle of a turn, but at least then we know where to zero in and focus on. And obviously the intention would be to have this as close to real time as possible, and even to start bringing some predictive analytics into this. Harry, we can start moving to the wrap up on the next slide. So I would want to share with you, going back to that macro picture of the logistics chain where we sit now. The image on the right is the Linalytica map. This map I took 3 weeks ago. Cape Town was not on the map at the time. It shows the 20 most congested ports as at that date. I should have put the date on for you. It was about middle of May. But to say, here we are now, colleagues, we at the cusp of takeoff on citrus season exports, started roughly 15 May. We're on and about 700 containers a week, but from mid-June, from a week or 2 weeks from now, we're going to be peaking at 1,000 containers a week just on citrus. You can imagine how much energy will go into that, and how sensitive the terminal will become to fluidity on citrus exports. If we fall over on citrus exports, it'll knock on all the other cargo. Waiting time to berth has improved. It was more than 6 days in March. It's down to 2 days in May. We are holding thumbs with this weather. There is a risk that waiting time to berth can push out again, and vessel total turnaround time has also improved. It was more than 15 days after that very severe January, February weather, and we've managed to bring it down to 4 days, which is very close to global good practice. Holding thumbs there again, because obviously as waiting time to berth stretches out, so a vessel turnaround time will also stretch out. And then there was that very encouraging improvement on Linalytica. We slipped down a little since the 2nd of May because mostly of weather, and there are operational availability problems in the equipment. I think Transnet and TPT would be the first to acknowledge that. It was acknowledged again this morning in a port operations coordination meeting. And it applies particularly to the operational availability of rubber-tired gantries. TPT has deployed a 9th ship-to-shore crane to Cape Town, which has made a huge positive impact, and a 3rd mobile crane to the multi-purpose terminal, which is incredibly useful. And TNPA has deployed hydraulic shore tensioners to 2 berths in the main container terminal, which is mitigating the impact of ranging, the underwater current that comes into the port this time of the year. So we have one berth still vulnerable, and we are really on our knees with TNPA to deploy short tensioners to that berth as well. And we're in conversation about that. And many of you will know about Balcon, the lease that Transnet Freight Rail has given to a shipping line to redevelop that particular facility as an inland terminal for Port of Cape Town. And we're hugely excited about that. It's likely to be fairly operational before the deciduous fruit export season of the end of this year. And obviously load shedding remains a constraint, and we are equally grateful about, I think, 2 days of very close to no load shedding. I see it even impacted on the rand-dollar exchange rate yesterday, with some strengthening in the rand. Perhaps just the last point on the current summary is I should have added the bullet on the dashboard that I've just shared with you, because that's our current priority as well. Then if we can go to the last slide, Harry, I'd just like to share with you the image I've put there is almost like a design thinking type of perspective, because it feels to me often as if the work we're doing on logistics development is technical in many ways, but that design thinking is very helpful, because there's a lot of blue sky still in how we imagine logistics and how we take it to the next level, and how we imagine collaboration, which obviously also has huge opportunities for improvement. So firstly, we'd like to keep doing what is working, intensify the collaboration. I think that came through very strongly in Jonita's presentation. And although we specify Transnet there, I think if you remember the image I gave on the logistics chain, it's important for us that the collaboration must be through the entire logistics chain, the entire network, to use your language, Harry, from origin to destination on both flows, the import and the export flow, and how we then improve our synchronization among all the nodes in this particular logistics chain. Going forward, we have a sense that there will have to be a lot more focus on integrated cargo planning, how we begin to bring the planners in the cold stores and the container terminals and the shipping lines together. And we believe the dashboard can play a huge role there. We have pockets of excellence in terms of understanding cargo flows in some of those nodes, but the default is where the weakest node on the planning capacity is. And if there are important vacancies in cargo planning teams, that manifests almost immediately in terms of fluidity of logistics. And then how we beginning to bring the rich information and data we have on weather into the planning for cargo, so that we don't have to react every time a terminal goes windbound and try to catch up because the cargo keeps flowing. And then thirdly, what the targets are that we jointly pursue and how we measure them. And one of those targets would have to be the operational availability of heavy lifting equipment. But then you cannot just talk about a rubber-tired gantry in isolation, because it is a team thing, almost like that final quote we saw in the previous presentation. For every rubber-tired gantry, there's a certain number of haulers and a certain number of forklifts. And every basket or every clutch of rubber-tired gantries feeds a ship-to-shore crane. So that entire fleet needs to be intact and functional. And then moving from there to suitable opportunities for private sector participation. And I see this is a huge focus in the National Crisis Logistics Committee. And we're already seeing some evidence of that with Balcon, and we're seeing evidence in Durban and Kucha in terms of private sector operator. And it doesn't just have to be big entire nodal moves, UNITA, so we can have small events within a particular process or sub-process that we can commercialize, and if it makes sense, and so ultimately optimize the whole chain. And then finally, Harry and colleagues, all of it would come together in terms of how we collectively make our high growth scenario happen, that potential for 26% growth and 20,000 new jobs. And that's just on the Cape Town container cargo logistics chain. So optimize that and then replicate the energy and the thinking on other chains in the Western Cape, whether it be the grain cargo chain or whether it be certain import cargo chains that we still need to understand better. And then obviously not in the Western Cape alone, but some of these logistics chains would manifest into other provinces or even maybe dominate. But I think this design thinking logistics chain development approach can be replicated for other logistics chains with the same successful outcome of promoting economic growth and job creation. Harry, colleagues, thank you so much for your kind attention. It was a pleasure to engage with you.
Glenn, thank you so much. This was an excellent presentation. I can see already getting hands there from the audience. You know, such a complex logistics chain, and the important work you guys are doing, complex logistics chain, improving resilience in our logistics chain across the entire chain, and then in the process, engineering economic growth and obviously creating jobs. And that is what we need in South Africa. So important, and the core for high growth scenario. And that's the important work you guys are doing to achieve that. And it's so great to hear from the crisis committee that private sector participation is so important as we're going to create jobs and so on. Then thank you so much for sharing with us, and I'm quite convinced that the people will have some nice questions for you during the panel discussion. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your presentation. Right, ladies and gents, let's then move back to our program. Our next presenter then will be Corinne Galant, and she's the Deputy Director, Freight Mobility Department of Western Cape Government, and she's going to talk about the concept study, Waste on Rail. Thank you very much, Corinne.
Good morning, Harry, colleagues.
Good morning.
I guess I'm audible because you greeted me.
Yes, you are.
And can you just confirm that my picture is also showing?
No, not yet.
Okay. That's odd. It's enabled my side.
We can see you, Corinne.
Oh yeah, that's what I meant. That's what I meant. Thanks, Glenn.
You, yes.
Yeah, I haven't started sharing yet. I wanted to first greet everyone properly. So yeah, Good morning, everyone. And thank you, Harry, and the organizers of this event and the many sponsors of this event that made it possible for the many presentations that we are seeing today, and as well as our own. As Harry introduced me, I'm Corinne Gallant. I work at the Western Cape Mobility Department. And in the theme or the spirit of today's theme, I will be sharing the responsibility for the presentation today with my colleague, Patsirai Gwara. Patsirai is from a company called Pegasus Strategy and Development, and they supported us in the execution of this study. So colleagues, let me share my screen and let's start talking rubbish. Okay, so you may wonder, what does waste have to do with a logistics network? And I would invite you to just look around in your space. I'm pretty sure that you've either got a pen or a piece of paper or the cell phone or laptop that you're using to connect to this event. We understand that all of these items went through a logistics network to get to us. It used transportation modes and it went through transport infrastructure to get from a manufacturer or a retailer to you. But what happens when your pen is dry and your piece of paper is no longer useful to you, or your laptop and your cell phone has gone bust? It becomes waste. We discard it. And once it becomes waste, it also relies on a logistics network to go from you or a manufacturer's place of business to a landfill site, or hopefully some kind of recycling plant. But it needs to end up at some kind of waste infrastructure point, and it needs to go through a waste transportation phase. So therefore, it's very relevant to the theme of today's topic or today's event, because to get that network working, there's a lot of codependencies and cooperation that's embedded in the system, and we will highlight this as we go ahead. So the task of waste management is currently that of our municipalities, in particular our local municipalities, and it's truly a challenging task for them. We've spoken to several of our municipalities, and generally the concerns that they have is that they just don't have sufficient budgets. They've got to take care of so many service delivery issues, and waste management is just one of many of their responsibilities within that limited budget. They're also running quickly out of available landfill airspace, and they also suffer with aging fleets. They don't have enough budget to maintain these fleets. So the actual transportation task of this waste is a very challenging one. Now, there is a policy of the regionalization of waste, which is being implemented in the province. And this policy requires that there be several large landfill sites in all the districts, rather than having many multiple smaller waste management or landfill sites. And the idea is that this regionalization will introduce economies of scale, which will then reduce operating and capital costs and increase efficiencies in the task. But regionalization itself also requires extreme and enhanced levels of cooperation and coordination between these municipalities. They've got to work cross-boundary, and they've got to share infrastructure when it comes to the landfill site itself, but also the transportation infrastructure needs to be shared, and where appropriate, sometimes they need to share the vehicles responsible for waste collection. So it's obvious then that cooperation in this space from all stakeholders, as well as a shared effort and investment into the space, is needed to make the logistics network that supports waste management as efficient as possible. And this is also true for the waste transportation part of waste management. So this brings us to the Waste on Rail study itself. We wanted to understand how can rail as an option for transportation for waste enhance efficiencies in the waste management task. And this project was birthed from our provincial freight strategy, which among many others also aims to introduce or established a balance of modes required for freight transport in the province. We want to ultimately see that the appropriate commodities are being carried by the appropriate mode in the right volumes, so that no one mode is overburdened with a task, and of course the externalities that go associated with a particular mode taking up too much of that transport task. So some of the issues that I've already mentioned in the waste management is the increased cost of disposal, the increased volumes of waste that is being carried on the road, and then the fact that landfill airspace is running out very quickly. And these challenges can be addressed from two perspectives. The one is to reduce the cost of transporting that waste, which speaks to a transport solution. And then the other approach would be to reduce the amount of waste that is actually being generated, so that it reduces the demand for that waste to be moved. And this speaks to waste minimization efforts. That is not the focus of the study. This study specifically looked at the transport solutions. So we first wanted to understand what is the modal split in the province when it comes to waste. And you will see that the graph at the bottom left shows you that road is dominating in all the sectors of the Western Cape economy that relies on freight transport. And it is absolutely no different in waste. The 2.7 million tons of waste that we generate is transported only by road. There is not a single ton on rail. Then we also created or established indicative transportation costs for both modes. And you'll see in the bottom of this graph, the rates or the costs were determined for different distances. And through to transport economics, that transport rates decrease as distances increases. Unfortunately for us in the province, all our waste movement is short distance, so they fall under 50 kilometers, therefore also incurring the highest possible transport costs. Just a point also, these rates only compared direct costs like fuel, driver wages, and maintenance. We did not consider externality costs in doing this comparison. Of course, we had to consult with our stakeholders, and we really went through an extensive process in identifying who the stakeholders would be. And we identified firstly Transnet Freight Rail as our primary stakeholder, because they are the owner of the freight rail network, and then also the municipalities who have the task of actually doing waste management in the province. And the maps that you see just shows for the district municipalities who we were able to meet with and who not, and then in the local municipalities with whom we had successful engagements and with whom we did not. But really the takeaway from our conversation was that Transnet Freight Rail definitely sees an opportunity for waste on rail, and they are in favor of it. But there is a need for private sector participation in the space, not just in terms of operations, but also when it comes to investment in the operating structures that's required, as well as the infrastructure that's required to make it possible. From the municipalities, some of the points that they stressed was that they just do not have sufficient volumes to make initiatives like recycling or waste to energy possible. And even the option of transporting waste on rail is made more difficult by the fact that as individual municipalities, they just don't have sufficient volumes of waste. The fact that infrastructure investment is extremely high and also undefined makes the task very difficult, and it makes it almost impossible for municipalities to wrap their head around how they would even make something like this possible for if it's just them trying to implement the solution. Then, of course, I think Dr. Marie spoke to the issues that Transnet Freight Rail is facing in terms of capacity in the network. But in reality, Transnet is facing many operational challenges, some from internal because there's just inefficiencies in the way that the transport services run. But there's also external factors like theft and vandalism that they have to deal with. On a weekly basis, there's about 50 kilometers of overhead cables that get stolen, and that causes disruptions to supply chain for days on end in some instances. So the risk of disruption when it comes to waste transportation has extreme implications, not just from an operational perspective, but also when you consider the environmental impact. Just imagine the stink it would cause if you've got a train load of waste sitting somewhere, cannot move, it's festering for days. So municipalities cannot, they cannot really consider rail with its current reliability issues as an option for transport over road. Then also in general, municipalities felt that government, a provincial government can do a lot to help the waste conversation, which would include options for transportation. Because some municipalities are doing really well in the waste management space, but others are struggling. And they feel that there is benefit in sharing ideas, sharing approaches to waste management, and also to have Western Cape government flesh out some of the implications of the strategies and policies that it requires municipalities to implement. And then finally, most of the municipalities, including the city of Cape Town, actually has waste infrastructure located very close to the freight rail network. But in all the cases, no one is seriously considering constructing or investing in freight infrastructure to support waste on rail. And then in summary, on the stakeholder consultation with municipalities, Overberg District Municipality, where the Karweiderskraal landfill site is based, was very interested in pursuing a hybrid solution for the transportation of waste. The hybrid would make use of both road and rail, but Batsy Rai will go into more detail. And then West Coast, Cape Winelands and Garden Route said that they would consider the hybrid solution for very specific landfill sites. Central Karoo, although we didn't speak to the district municipality, the local municipalities were very clear that they would not consider rail transportation because they just don't have sufficient volumes nor budgets to make it possible in their space. I will now hand over to Batsy, who will take us through the next few slides.
Thank you so much, Corinne. So colleagues, my name is Batsy Raigwara. I'm a transport planner at Pegasus. I will take you through just some of the identification and prioritization of opportunities for this case study. I'll switch off my video for now. Right, so colleagues, the process for just identifying and prioritizing opportunities was really a four-step process. So I'll take you through that before we jump into the case study. Now, the first step was really to identify in a way the regional landfill facilities are. And in the figure, you can see that the planned facilities are shown in blue, and then the operational facilities are shown in green. I also want to bring to your attention, Fissershoek was added to this map, although it is a municipal landfill site, but just to its strategic location and importance to the metro, we decided to add it on that list. So for this particular study, we also just focused on the operational landfill facilities in a way of so that some of the learnings that we can take from a case study or from whatever we develop can also be developed further for the plant facilities. Now, the second step really involved just mapping the freight rail network on top of that layer for the landfill facilities. Now, Petro SA, Karweiderskraal, and Fissershoek will now be discussed further. Thanks, Corinne. If you can move, if you can show all the points in the slide. Thanks. Now, for Vissershoek, it is a municipal landfill facility, but the rail services were suspended in 2018. Therefore, for this study, we decided not to continue with the analysis for Vissershoek. Now, at the time of the study, the Petro SA landfill facility was scheduled for decommissioning in March 2023. Therefore, we did not proceed further with that landfill facility. As Corinne mentioned earlier, Carvidas-Crowe, there was really a lot of support from stakeholders, and also the fact that Carvidas-Crowe is operational. It was taken further in our process of analysis. Thanks. Next slide. So the third step really is just to understand the positioning of Carvidas-Crowe and some of the catchment area and opportunities that are available. Now, in terms of current users, Theovaderskloof and Overstrand are the current users of the landfill facility. However, there are potential users that can make use of this opportunity, and these are the two local municipalities in the Overberg District Municipality, Cape Agulhas and Swellendam. Because also they are running out of landfill space in their jurisdictions, it makes sense for them to explore this opportunity. We also considered the city of Cape Town, particularly the Helderberg region that borders the metro, that can potentially use the same facility. Moving on to the next slide, which is step number 4. As Corinne mentioned earlier, the predominant mode of waste transportation is road haulage, and rail haulage was also explored for the Athlone Vissershoek when it was operational. For this case study, we decided to add an additional model, which really is a hybrid that starts with the road leg, moving on to rail, and again finishing the last mile being a road leg. Thanks, Corinne. Now, colleagues, the 4 steps that I've just discussed, this led us to just investigating the Carvidas-Crowe landfill facility and the transport options that are available. Now, the intention here was to compare the status quo with an alternative transport method. So what you are seeing in the model is really the Carvidas-Crowe landfill facility in the middle. And then you have 2 municipalities, Theovaderskloof and Overstrand, that are currently using that facility. As we discussed in the catchment area, we have there's an opportunity for Cape Agulhas and Swellendam, as well as portions of the city of Cape Town to use the same facility. In the model, you see that the solid arrow, black arrow, indicates a road leg, whereas the double dashed arrow indicates a railway line. And just for interest, on the right, the figure really shows just a picture that was taken when we were on site. That is covered one of the cells at Carvidas-Crowe landfill facility. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned, the idea was just to understand just the total cost for the status quo as well as an alternative option. So just to get to the combined cost, we undertook a process of calculating the cost, which was a 7-step method. But of particular interest in our process was to understand a component that is often overlooked, which is the cost of externalities. Now, the externality costs that were taken into account for the study included accidents, congestion, emissions, landway, noise, and policing. We'll just explore in the next slide how we, some of the figures for the cost of emissions and the direct cost. Now, for just a comparison of the direct and externality cost, there's just some of the key findings that we found is that the direct cost for the hybrid model are always greater than the road-only cost, at least for this case study. Secondly, so that's really the bigger portion of the blue line of the blue bar graph. It was just bigger compared to the status quo. Now, if we consider the cost of externalities for the hybrid model, it was less than that of the road-only cost of externalities. Now, that's the blue portion that Corinne is highlighting now. But of interest, the cost of externalities only accounts for a fraction of the total cost, right? So for the hybrid model, the cost of externalities were less than 5% of the total cost. And for the road-only option, they were less than 9%. Thanks, Corinne. So colleagues, the case study really, it was a simplistic model, and there are certain limitations to that. And a detailed feasibility study will be required just to understand the total cost, the total project cycle cost, and perhaps a cost-benefit analysis. Now, in terms of the transfer stations, compactor systems, and capital investments, and some of the infrastructure like cranes, these are some of the things that will be required, that will need to be taken into account. And in line with the theme of today, some of the capital investments will need a significant portion of capital investment will be required for upgrading an existing infrastructure and perhaps construction of new railway sidings. Also, space considerations will need to be taken into account in a more detailed feasibility study. I think, Corinne, next slide. Thank you so much. This is the portion that I presented to you, and I'll hand over to Corinne just to finish off with the slide. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. Right, so in summary, friends and colleagues, the study concluded that Karweiderskraal definitely has potential for a hybrid solution, making use of both road and rail, as the diagram flighted earlier showed. But it became very obvious, not just when we concluded the study, but when we presented the findings of the study to our many stakeholders, that the implementation of this option is extremely complicated and complex, and that there are a myriad of dependencies that the study did not explore, but that would be that needs to be addressed in order to make it possible. And for one example, the concern with transporting waste from the outer edge of the city and from the other municipalities to Karweiderskraal was that the landfill site would reach its capacity a lot sooner than its initial lifespan indicated. And one solution that was presented was that there could be a waste-to-energy plant established on the Karweiderskraal site. However, that waste-to-energy plant is in itself also extremely capital intensive. There are environmental issues like the pollutants that would come from operating that facility. The maintenance cost of running a waste-to-energy plant is astronomical. So that's just one option that would need to be considered if you were to make Karweiderskraal actually viable. And it introduces a whole range of other costs and dependencies. And so to every thread that we pulled in this Karweiderskraal jersey just introduced a lot more complications, and it made it very obvious to us that neither our partners at the Environmental Affairs and Development Planning Department, nor private sector alone, nor municipalities alone, nor us as the Transport Department alone could resolve these issues. The transportation is one element, but there are so many other related and dependent elements within the waste management system that would need to be addressed. The table, I will just briefly summarize. It takes key takeaways from the study findings that really highlights what we've spoken already, the lack of reliability in the freight rail network, waste on rail initiatives not really being a priority for municipalities, the fact that many smaller municipalities just don't have sufficient waste volumes, and then the fact that the infrastructure, which is owned by Transnet, the rail infrastructure and then the supporting infrastructure that would need to be developed is very capital intensive and expensive. And the solution to all of those really lies in a partnership, in identifying at a high level where is opportunity for commercialization of some of the elements of the system, where private sector can come on board, how Transnet can address issues of reliability and capacity within its network, and then also how government, both national and provincially, can help smooth out the road by either providing funding. I don't know where it will come from, because government like Transnet is asset rich and cash poor, but that's one option in the provision of dedicated funding, but then also informing or playing a much more enhanced coordination role to bring these solutions and options together so that municipalities who are interested can actually implement. Then finally, in conclusion, shared principles are evident in all elements of the waste transportation task. There's shared infrastructure, shared responsibility, and shared maintenance that need to take place in order for these solutions to become viable. In terms of infrastructure, it's both a rail and road network and the supporting waste transfer stations and equipment, and as well as the vehicles that need to be shared between the users of the system. There's definitely shared responsibility in that we all have a role in promoting the most efficient transport option for waste transportation. And then the shared responsibility in reducing the cost of transport, particularly from the perspective of government, Transnet, and the business sector and municipalities. And then I think the next one really hit home to me is that we've got shared responsibility in terms of reducing the amount of waste that needs to be transported. And that goes right down to citizen level. Every other cog in this system has a role to play, but the citizen that is discarding that pencil, pen, paper, whatever, can also play their part and take on their share of responsibility in reducing the amount of waste generated that ultimately needs to be transported. And then, of course, shared maintenance. Once these facilities are constructed and in place and operational, they need to be maintained. We have seen in the rail space in particular what lack of maintenance does to infrastructure once it's in place. And we certainly would not want that to be the case when we manage to hopefully establish a waste on rail solution that is supported by good and functioning infrastructure. And thank you so much. That is our presentation this morning. Handing back to you, Ari.
Rin and Basti, thank you so much for an excellent presentation. It's always so nice to hear about case studies. And as they say, with the Tetaki eats the tar, you guys have done lots of good research and given such valuable feedback to this forum. And we really trust and hope that those externalities, that's challenges for you guys, that will be sorted. You're aligned with the right people, Pegasus, and them, to make this work. We're looking forward to the future presentation where you're going to talk about, the first trains running waste on rail. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ari.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at our program, and it's time for a short break. So we're going to take a 10-minute short break. I'll put up a timer on the screen for us, and I'll see you in 10 minutes time. Go and grab a cup of coffee or something. Thank you very much. Ladies and gents, those of you who are back, Raylene from SAAFF is going to share with us a presentation about SAPICS, and I think you'll find that quite useful. So, Raylene, you're welcome to share with us. Thank you very much when you're ready.
Thank you, Harry. It's a pleasure to be on the Transport Forum once again. I'll just quickly share my screen. Is that fine, Harry?
Yes, thank you.
So it's the first time that SAAFF and SAPICS decided to collaborate and co-host. We decided to co-host their conference with them, and it's their 45th conference this year. Each year they have a very successful conference with over 700, excuse me, to 750 participants. So this will be happening next week at the Century City Conference Center. We are very excited. There's already 700 delegates registered. And I just wanted to share a little bit of the program with everyone. There's a few workshops that they've planned. Most of them are already filled up, 10 workshops on the Sunday. I won't go through the detail, but just to show you a few of the programs there. There's a warehousing summit, which is very valuable information that they will be sharing there. The actual session starts on Monday. So SAPICS will be opening the event with their artificial intelligence session, followed by our CEO, Unita Maria, with her NLCC committee that they established recently. So the theme for that session will be together in partnerships, and we will see how the public and private sectors join forces to work on our critical logistics network. So the next sessions, there's quite a few in different halls, but the main one that I would like to focus on here is the rail policy. And you can see the speakers there. We've got Professor Jan Havenga, Marcella from ARIA, Warwick Lord, and then our very own Devlin Naidu will moderate that session. The next session that we will be looking at here specifically is in the meeting room 11, is our impact on SEZs and IDZs. And we have the World Logistics Program who will join us from the UAE, Dubai, and they will be speaking on this. So we have Jacob from the UAE Embassy and Madej Matika. As you carry on to the next day, of the next session, trade corridors. You've recently may have seen the article in News 24 on trade corridors and the issues we're experiencing there. So Barbara Mommen and Bruce Ellison will take us through the current challenges there. Lebogang will be our moderator. She's well known in the supply chain industry. If you carry on a little bit further, capacity building. This will be a very informative session where we look at the skills challenges in the industry, not just from our point of view in our association, but we are looking at across the industry. So we will be bringing in quite a few speakers. Ingrid Dubisson, Marcela once again from ARIA from a rail perspective, Nerusha and Roy from Bidec Cargo. If you carry on a little bit further, we had a speaker earlier talking about the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. What's the rollout? What's the uptake and the challenges they have? So John Rocker and John Stewart will be speaking, and Lebogang will moderate that. Then on Tuesday, very valid session, Western Cape Development. We will have Glenn Steyn, who spoke earlier. We will have him presenting with Theo Boshoff and John Lawson. Of course, I'm focusing on just a few sessions to take everyone through this program, but there are sessions in all the halls and meeting rooms. So it's a very busy program, but very impactful and necessary for our industry to meet and go through all of these challenges. Next session, this one in meeting room 11, is just a follow-on session from the previous session on ICFF and the skills shortages. Here we will focus a little bit more on the professional body, which is ICFF, Institute for Customs and Freight Forwarding, on what's the requirements, the CPD requirements, and just to upskill individuals in the industry. Here we will be talking on the next session, the ESG score. Just one change there, Isabel Meyer could not speak, so it will be Maria and Petrus Gerber. Then on e-commerce, we will have Natasha from FedEx Express taking us through the removal of non-tariff barriers in Africa. That's quite an exciting session to attend. These are all SAPIC sessions, so we are not directly involved in them. Same with these ones. Here we will have breaking down barriers, women in supply chain. So our moderator, Lebogang from SingPoint, will be participating in that session. And then that's the end of the program. So the Wednesday will be quite a few site visits, and two that SAAFF will be involved in is the FPT terminal tour, where the delegates will actually be able to go on an actual working vessel. And the last visit will be the Cape Town port tour. Very exciting. We will go on a luxury bus with a person telling us what's happening in the port. We're not allowed to get off the bus, but the bus will take us through the whole port. There's some exciting views from there's a grass area, so lots happening. And then there's a leisure tour, but that won't be SAAFF won't be involved in that. But thank you, Harry. Just wanted to show everybody what the next few days will look like for SAAFF and the collaboration between us and SAPICS. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Raylene. Thanks for sharing. Looking forward to seeing you guys there. Definitely going to attend myself. So hopefully we'll see a lot of the people on this call also there. Thank you, Raylene. Appreciate it. All right, ladies and gents, let's move back to our program today. And we're still talking about the logistics network, understanding shared infrastructure, shared responsibility, and shared maintenance, 8th of June, 2023. And our next presenter then is Mr. Devlin Naidu. He's the Executive SAAFF and other government agencies for South African Association of Freight Forwarders. And he's going to talk to us about the digitization and integration of other government agencies with SAAFF, opening the single window. Thank you, Devlin.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Harry, for the introduction. You can confirm if my screen is visible, my presentation as well, and that I am audible.
Yes, looking good. And there you can continue. Thank you, Devlin.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues, again, and good morning, fellow panelists. Thank you for the opportunity. I regard it as an honor and a privilege to be with you this morning and share some insights in terms of the integration of other government agencies with SARS opening the single window. Before I commence, as is customary, I would like to acknowledge our Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Unita Maria, indeed a passionate captain of industry for SA Inc. Also our Head of Research and Development, Mr. Jacob van Rensburg, for his insights in shaping today's presentation, and the lead author sitting at SAAFF National as the National Project Lead, Mr. Clifford Evans, in terms of his insights and sort of his passion and resilience to the realization of the single window. I'm very excited to talk you through the presentation, colleagues, and share some insights. And please feel free to interact and pose questions once the discussion has concluded. So we have on screen a map of the supply chain, and we look at the theme of today. What was serendipitous is that we had diverse presentations looking at diverse topics, but the one commonality is that all of these presentations dovetailed with the theme of shared responsibility, shared infrastructure, and shared network. And for that, we must acknowledge the vehicle of the Transport Forum under the custodianship of Mr. Harry van Heestien for having the foresight some 16 years ago to realize the brilliance that this platform would deliver. And again, very coherent with today's theme. So colleagues, I'd like to share with you the role plays in the supply chain and look at how we integrate in terms of single window. So we all have a shared network. Yes, you've got the top 5 shipping lines in the country. They sail on the same ocean or various oceans, obviously, but they share the ocean. They also share the port infrastructure. You have a plethora of transporters. They share the same road. And so you have a plethora of technical service providers. they all share the same EDI gateway. So where am I going with this? It's quite simple, colleagues. We have the various role players in the supply chain, and each role player has a unique responsibility. But the responsibility does not just sit with that role player. Let's have a look. Let's take customs as an example, and I'm going to get a bit technical now. If we look at Section 38 of the Act, it states that you have to submit a declaration in the prescribed form, the prescribed form being the SAD 500. On that point of having a shared responsibility, as much as customs is responsible for processing the declaration, we as a clearing agent in the extended supply chain have the responsibility to ensure that that declaration is true and correct and complies with the provisions of the Act. And so emphasizing the shared responsibility is an imperative in that we share the network as well, and we also share the infrastructure within that network. It's the EDI gateway, it's the port infrastructure, it's the road, the rail, and the airspace as well. Okay, so when we look at the supply chain, it's not just the physical movement of goods. Corinne, you mentioned a pen. I didn't realize you mentioned a cell phone and you mentioned a laptop. And so all of these goods have to pass through the supply chain, and no goods can legally enter or exit the Republic without first having been declared to SARS customs. Interesting, right? Not just SARS customs, but also customs at the country of origin. Imagine where you could submit a declaration at the country of origin and the same declaration is used in the country of origin. It's no longer an imagination, it is very soon a reality. And the reason for that is because of single window. Single window is recognized by the World Customs Organization under the UNECE, the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, recommendation 33, as being the eyes of the trader, right? So I know there's a famous song, Eye of the Tiger, but this is the eye of the trader. And imagine this, when you have visibility, when you have flexibility, and when you have efficiency, you now have an optimized supply chain because there's predictability, there's service reliability, and there's key deliverables that can be achieved. So on that note, let's get my specs on and improve the visibility. So colleagues, sorry, let me just get back to this slide. As we improve the visibility, this is what single window does. So the esteemed veterans on the call, 11,995. That's the magic number. 11,995 is the number of tariff lines that exist on the prohibited and restricted goods index. Now that is a number of lines, and as you can see, it's very complex. It's many government agencies. It's subject to various and diverse regulatory controls. And for that reason, you have to have an apex or a unified view of single window. And you achieve this through the integration with other government agencies by the Customs Administration. So if you would indulge me, I'm going to get a bit interactive and I'm going to leave this presentation shortly and I'm going to share my next screen, but I would like to have a bit of fun with our panelists and of course with the audience as well to show you how this all works. So yesterday I did some grocery shopping and I'm just going to access my hard drive very quickly. If memory serves me correctly, 040320. Yogurt. Let's take an example. So let's say we're importing yogurt from Brazil as an example. The yogurt is not manufactured in South Africa. And of course, we have various government agencies that are responsible for controlling or regulating the products that come into the Republic. But who is the overarching agency? The overarching agency is the South African Revenue Services. And a common misconception that traders and some members of trade have is that SARS sets the regulation or that SARS sets the rate of duty. No, SARS is the administrative agency. So in terms of their mandate, in terms of the DTIC in conjunction with ITEC and arm of the DTIC will set the rate of duty and specify measures in terms of import, export control, anti-dumping duties, so on and so forth. Now, that is in terms of the duty structure. Then in terms of other government agencies, Port Health, State Vet, NRCS, Plant Inspector, so on and so forth, all have a diverse set of mandates. And so what the single window does is it allows an integrated view where if, as an example, let's take yogurt. I chose this intentionally, right? So there's the HS code 040320. For colleagues that are not in the industry, for your benefit, every item that's imported into the Republic has a code. And so the code for yogurt is 040320. Of course, there's subvariants or subheadings that we find here under example, flavored or containing fruits, nuts, and cocoa as an example, cultured milk, etc. But let's just stick to the first at a subheading level, international level, 040320. Now, in terms of section 113, subsection 8A, other government agencies have the authority to detain cargo for inspection. So the next time we go into a store and we're eating an imported product and we live to tell the tale, let's acknowledge the shared responsibility of the clearing agent that made the declaration, that ensured that the permits were in place, of the other government agency that verified the content of the documentation and of the actual good in terms of sample testing, health certificates, lab analysis, etc. And let's also acknowledge the other government agency at the country of origin for ensuring that that product had been exported according to the regulations that conform with international health standards. So SAAFF plays a critical role, not just in protecting our economy, but also protecting the health and well-being of our citizens through this legislation. So let's have a look here. When we go to the authority, it is State Vet, Port Health Office, Department of Agriculture, Fishery and Forestries, now known as DALRAD, right? So obviously this needs to be updated, will help SARS in terms of the shared responsibility. But colleagues, on that note, you have 3 distinct government agencies. And so State Vet is going to look at the lab analysis from an animal origin point of view. Port Health is going to look at it from a health perspective, also looking at it, DNA analysis impacting the health of human beings consuming the imported product. And DALRAD is going to look at it from a plant origin point of view, in the case if it's a vegan product, as an example. But let's understand, you've got 3 government agencies that are looking at the same product. And so you could have State Vet that's taking 5 days, you could have Port Health that's taking 3 days, you could have DALRAD that's taking 2 days. And then all of a sudden, we've got a shared network, right? So we're sharing the supply chain. You've got 7 days added to the supply chain. And so let's currently have a look at what happens. So you've got a health certificate and you get a rubber stamp on it. And the point I wanted to make is, why then, if we look at the slide that I had initially, when we look at the country of origin and you've got exporters, you've got export management companies, so on and so forth, all you're doing as a documentary inspector at these government agencies is verifying the content to the product, stamping it as an extended health detention, and allowing the cargo to flow to the warehouse or client's premises. And so it's quite peculiar if we look at the verification. That can be done at origin because all you're doing is verifying, and a rubber stamping exercise should be instant, right? Not the 3 to 5 days that we see. And so we get sort of the feedback from the government agencies that there's a volume that they deal with, and there's challenges in terms of availability of staff and capacity, etc. So the solution then is single window, and it's no longer a talk shop, but it's a reality. Okay, so now that I've given you context in terms of this, and as I said, colleagues, it's not just yogurt. Let's have a bit more insight. So I'm going to go to another HS code here, 841320, right? So pumps for dispensing fuel or lubricants, it's a common one. It is restricted in terms of section 113.8a, right? I'll take you to the legislation shortly, just to give you context. But if we look here, it is detained for the non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, right? So it's a single government agency, and it says you cannot import this without providing a letter from the Non-Proliferation Council stating that it's not a weapon of mass destruction. And how absurd would it be that a pump, as an example, for dispensing fuel lubricants is a weapon of mass destruction? You've got to be really creative to use it as such. But in saying that, there's a proposal that Mr. Clifford Evans and Mr. Jean-Paul worked on to create subheadings within the PNR index. So when we move to a national single window, and you have the visibility of not just one government agency, but all government agencies and role plays in the extended supply chain, seen through the eyes of the trader, that is the importer, the exporter, the clearing agent, customs broker, freight forwarder, etc., is that you have that visibility and that coordinated approach in a shared network. Now, one other point, right? Let's get into an item that's not restricted. Okay, let's take this. Okay, this should be 960810. I'm going to do another one very quickly. This is not restricted, right? However, it could be that the index is incorrect, and for whatever reason, this item is subject to detention. And that is where SAAFF plays a critical role as the architects of the supply chain, which I'm going to elaborate on shortly, right? So let me stop sharing my screen here and go to another screen that will give us context in terms of international best practice, and I'll come back to my slide. Okay, so colleagues, as you can see here, the single window concept, as I mentioned, examines regulatory controls through the eyes of the trader. So yes, SARS looks at revenue in terms of the DTIC, and then the rates of duty, etc., are set accordingly, and SARS administers the collection of duty and VAT. And then, of course, regulatory controls are slightly deferred in terms of the other government agency mandate. But let's have a look at legislation. So, colleagues, as you can see, Harry, you can see that I've got section 113, right? Prohibitions and restrictions. Okay, excellent. So, colleagues, everything that we do in customs is governed by legislation. And so if we look at section 113 of the Act, I'm going to go specifically to 8A for a bit of a lesson, and if you would indulge me. An officer may, for the purposes of any law other than this Act. In other words, when they talk about any law, they refer to the other legislation, NRCS, NCC, the Consumer Protection Act 68 of 2008, the NRCS Act 5 of 2008, any other government agency law, basically, at the request of a member of the police force or the authority administering such law, right? So it's SAPS or the other government agency, detain any goods while under customs control. So it's not just customs, but of course the reliance on the specialist government agency for a particular product. So let's have a look at this. So colleagues here, 62, 15, 10, 9, 40% is the rate of duty. And you might ask a question, but this is of man-made fibers, so it's not detained for another government agency. However, it does lend itself to duty collection. And so we need to, when we position our submission, our proposal to SARS or other government agencies, we need to look at mutual benefit. So have a look at what we've done, and we encourage members on the call to try this. Yesterday, and Harry, again, thank you for organizing this quite strategically on the 8th of June, because just yesterday, the 7th of June, SARS released the the prohibited and restricted import and export list, right? So we're looking at it as up to date as possible. And if I click here, colleagues, it indicates that tariff headings 3503 and 3504 need to be detained for state vet. Previously, this was not the case because the index that we flighted earlier was incorrect. So how did this happen? Well, yet again, we share the infrastructure, being the EDI gateway, being the tools that we use to index, but we share the responsibility. We cannot say that SARS is responsible alone for this index. Yes, they execute the function, but this is what we've done. We've got an online portal, panelists and colleagues, that you could log your incorrect detention. So a member logged their incorrect detention on Monday. 24 hours later, the SARS acknowledged it, and 24 hours later, the index has been updated. So that's the magic of shared responsibility in terms of SAAFF as the architects of the supply chain. But let's take it further. My next slide that I will share when I get back to the presentation speaks to international benchmarking. So colleagues, this is a public domain, so you can also try this after just to play around with it. But National Single Window was launched in Singapore on the 1st of June, 1989. My math is not that great, but I think that should be around 34 years ago, 34 and a half years ago. And so when this was launched, obviously, it allowed the visibility to traders to have other government agency integration with customs, not just one government agency, but multiple government agencies, and allowed the trader to have a view through a single window. And again, just as specs provide us the 2020 vision, so too does single window provide us with an optimized visibility into the supply chain, which is imperative as we look at service reliability as a key component, right? So in terms of SARS and other government agencies, yes, this specific shared responsibility, we've got challenges. We've got infrastructure challenges at the port, you've got equipment challenges, so on and so forth. But if we optimize this element, it is one element less for us to consider as a non-tariff barrier. to trade. Okay, so I flighted, if you'd remember earlier, colleagues, I shared the example of yogurt. So I'm just going to go 040320. I type in the description down here, yogurt, and I click start search, right? To get here, it's again, you go to national single window, you scroll down and you click on importing goods, and then you look at prohibited and restricted. So while in customs in South Africa, they say it's section 113.8A, there's equal or equivalent legislation in Singapore customs. And I think Port of Singapore is looked at as sort of the, amongst the world sort of benchmarked as one of the world's best port systems or port infrastructure. And that's been very similar in terms of what we've used here. So anyway, for whatever reason, it's not, let's try it again very quickly to give you a demo. You use the product search engine, you enter your HS code, and it gives you not just the other government agency restriction. That's why I use this example of the tie. It also gives you the rate of duty, right? I'm hoping that it does work now so that we could show you the context, and then I'll get back to my slide. 040320, and then again, yogurt. There we go. And then we'll type in the capture code at the bottom here very quickly, and then let's let the magic happen. So start search. Okay, let's try 040320. 8 KHY2. So colleagues, as we wait for this, oh, there we go. This is brilliant. So have a look at this setup, colleagues. Right, you've got the HS code 040320. You've got the description, right? So at the subheading level, whilst in South Africa it's not .11, I think it's .00. Here you've got the subheading, you've got the government agency, and you've got the rate of duty. So it's duty free, right? And then if you click over, if you click over the government agency, it gives you the as up-to-date information in terms of the contact details, the operating hours. So we don't find ourselves with those odd notices that come through in terms of change in operational hours for extended health detentions at Port Health. I think that was circulated last week. And it gives you a direct link to the other government agency. So you might ask a question, but why are you showing us all of this if it's not in South Africa? Well, once more, acknowledging Mr. Evans and Mr. Poole, it will be a reality for South Africa very soon. And what I mean by that is SAAFF, as the architects of the supply chain, under the leadership of our CEO and indeed a captain of industry, Dr. Maria, have submitted a proposal to SARS Customs that they have accepted. And we are pleased to announce that the PNR index will be digitized and also linked to the rate of duty. So you'll now have a one-stop platform that you could use to interface with SARS and the other government agencies. I think that's quite brilliant. And again, that is credit to the colleagues mentioned earlier. So have a look once more, colleagues. It's the international benchmarking that we spoke of. Now, I mentioned single window for the benefit, colleagues, of those that are not very au fait with what the single window concept is. It basically links not just SARS and other government agencies, but customs, port authorities, and other regulatory agencies across the value chain. So if you look at the country of origin, let's again stick on the concept of Singapore. So you've got an export coming from Singapore, it's coming to the port of Durban or the port of Cape Town, and you now have a swift, costless, transparent, predictable, and competitive supply chain because you've got the single window concept. Our CEO often reminds us that single window is just the technology, right? And this is very important to understand that single window is the technology. As role plays in the supply chain, we need to influence the process, right? And the beauty of single window, colleagues, is that it's not just electronic, right? It also allows for an alternative. It gives you flexibility. So if systems are down, it's not the end of the world. There's also a paper solution, right? And it integrates again with transporters, with various government agencies. We've got 41 key vertical industries in the Republic. The department, agricultural industry, AGBIS as an example, as the lead voice for the agricultural sector is just one of them. You've got Port Health, you've got State Vet, Plant Inspector, NRCS, NCC. I think in total, you've got about 14 government agencies. And imagine you have visibility. You have 14 government agencies working not in divergence, but in convergence. They're working in synchronicity. And that is the beauty of single window. So I can then understand why our veterans on the call have advocated for this concept and authored various position papers on that. So it's the eyes of the trader. You have a better visibility. And so let's look at shared technology. As I said again, it's not just single window is a technology brilliant, but who drives this? Trade. Each of you seated at your offices are the architects of the supply chain. You are the co-creator responsible for delivering the solution to SARS. And you might ask, hang on, it should be the other way around. SARS should deliver the solution to us. Now, let's ask ourselves the question, who understands the supply chain more intimately? Is it SARS? Is it the other government agency? Or is it trade? It's trade, because we're interacting with SARS and we're interacting with the other government agency. And we are best placed, again, as the architect of the supply chain, as freight forwarders and customs brokers, to prescribe what needs to be done by SARS and the other government agencies, because we understand the shortcomings here. We look at the lessons learned, we look at the time it takes, and we communicate that to SARS so that SARS can then, on their side, engineer the process to ensure that there is an optimal flow. So again, we look at the shared technology and we're all using it. Trade is using it, other government agencies are using it, and SARS is using it. Let's look at the government agency codes in a bit more detail, and I am mindful of time. There's been several status codes introduced, and as the presentation, in the title said, insights from SARS. So we're looking at specifically these codes. I'm going to use one of them. Let's take code 70, the one at the top, and then I'll go to 76 thereafter. So there's a description that links to this customs response code. Currently, members of trade, you would know that you get a code 4, which I'll touch on in the next slide, and then I'll talk you through the as is and then the needs to be. So I'm going to read this. In the event where no risk is assessed for customs, but there is a PNR requirement to facilitate the opportunity for an OJ intervention and outcome. And so this is where, again, as members of trade, we have the shared responsibility to channel the concerns with regard to this message to SARS so that it can be proactively corrected as opposed to reactively addressed. And I think that's the beauty, again, of having a shared network, a shared purpose, responsibility, and of course, the shared infrastructure being the EDI gateway. And technical service providers are already gearing their systems to accommodate these new customs response codes and the new process. Again, mapped by process. Single window is the technology. The process underpins the efficiency of that technology. And as efficient as the technology can be, if the process is not mapped, the technology will fail. Right. Coincidentally, I received an email during the presentation as well from my colleague, my esteemed colleague Raylene, and she was saying we need to get some SAAFF banners or banners for the SAAFF conference from overseas. It's going to be imported into the Republic. And then again, it lends itself to the single window integration in terms of efficiency. So have a look here, colleagues. Right, you've got your code 13, which is request for supporting documents, acknowledgement of supporting documents, and then you've got now the case creation in terms of the other government agency, where it's stopped by SARS and stopped by the other government agency. Right, currently, you can see it's very fragmented or disconnected. And so in life, I believe strategically, when you want government departments and government agencies to accept a proposal, you have to also highlight the benefit to them. Now, the immediate benefit would say, hang on, I'm going to get increased revenue. And what I mean by that is obviously the more efficient trade is, you would expect the greater the flow or the throughput is, right? So if trade is efficient, you import more, there's more duty and VAT being collected, so that's revenue. And then you look at the export benefit. Obviously, the more you export from the Republic, the higher sort of the positive trade surplus you have in terms of balance of payment. And so when we get SARS to look at that benefit, it's excellent, but we've got to take it a step further. Let's show them the benefit in terms of capacity. Now we don't have to email PNR index, the group email address anymore. Neither do they have to have, we're actually giving them visibility. Here, they would just say DT another government agency. They would have no idea what happens to that cargo thereafter. It's just the shipping line or the airline or the road transport in the case of cross-border freight that gets that release stamped by the government agency. And SARS had no visibility. So we're saying to SARS, guys, we want to provide you with visibility as well. And when you show the benefit in terms of visibility and capacity, you have definitely got yourself a proposal that you can invariably consider as accepted. There's SA Inc. We all work for SA Inc. We've got different roles, some of us in leadership, some of us in management, some of us in operations. But what unites us is that we're all citizens of our country and we all have an economy to protect. Our head of research and development, an expert economist at that, often reminds us that just as the heart pumps blood to the rest of the body and keeps us alive and breathing, so too does the supply chain remain the heartbeat of the economy, SA Inc. And in order to have an efficient supply chain, you need an intact logistics network. And where does it come from? It comes from people, okay? Hopefully this doesn't get me in a lot of hot water, but what happens behind the scenes in the SAAFF offices, Harry, is that Junita would often get a foolscap piece of paper, an A3 paper, and in true architect fashion, she'll start with a pencil in hand and ideas in her head and draw up sort of a master plan for what needs to happen. And then it happens. So people, right? It's accountable, responsible, purpose-driven. Then we look at systems and we look at the technology and we look at the infrastructure. It has to be secure, right? So that it doesn't breach confidentiality, it doesn't breach other restrictions in terms of government protocols that are sensitive, risk management, etc. For obvious reasons, are predictable and conducive, right? So if you think of copper as a material, copper conducts electricity. So we need to be conducive. And in order to be, what conducts it? It's the systems. But again, at the foundation, it starts with people. And then to make single window a success, it's the process and procedure. So there's currently a pilot that's running with the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, DALRAD. And within this pilot, they test the process. And if the process fails, they correct the process. And then we go live. And then we look at lessons learned. But it doesn't stop there. As the architects of the supply chain, you've got various role plays, public and private sector. And I know Zutari is on this call here as well. I'm no expert, but I have a very limited understanding and some exposure, is that when we look at underpinning, it's about having a solid foundation. So it starts with a business case development. 10 years ago, SAAFF or SARS approached DALRAD and said, we want to do this. And then very recently, SAAFF resurrected that. Again, once more, the colleagues that I mentioned earlier, Clifford and John, submitted the business case, and then we got that accepted. And then as the architects, we look at co-design of the process, co-creation, pilot testing, lessons learned. Then we monitor and evaluate. How can we improve? Is it making an impact? Is the integration working? Is single window delivering that enhanced visibility, eyes through the trader scenario, or eyes of the trader scenario? And then we look at how can we get better? Because the supply chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So we need to continuously improve, and we rise by lifting others. So this is just, again, an illustrative diagrammatic representation of SARS and other government agencies. I did a very practical demonstration when we looked at some of those HS codes and how it filters from the other government agencies. Okay, and that is the integration. But again, who has the responsibility? It's not just SARS, it's not just other government agency, it's not just SAAFF, it's not just all of us on this call. It's an amalgamation. And so that is, again, lending itself to the theme. I think we've stressed that quite a lot. And as I progress to the penultimate slide, just as life is much more successfully looked at from a single window, so too is trade facilitation experienced much more seamlessly through single window technology. Very important, mapped by process, right? And once more, I must acknowledge our head of research and development, Jakob van Rensburg, our CEO, Dr. Maria, for their insights, and Mr. Clifford Evans for shaping today's presentation. I hope that I have done justice. I hope that I've made some sort of tangible impact in terms of what you can do, right? Because it's always nice, we hear the presentations, it's fantastic, and we take some lessons learned, we apply it in a workplace, but you can literally log into the SAAFF website now and start logging your incorrect detention. And then when you see published by SARS, who was the author? You were the author, because you identified the incorrect detention. You raised it via SAAFF to SARS, and you corrected the index. There's an ancient Eastern proverb that reads something like, every man should do three things. So, first plant a tree, because obviously that's going to grow and it's a legacy. Write a book, so you leave a message behind. And then the other one was have a son, so that he takes your name. But if you don't write a book, it's fine. Just log your incorrect detention on a lighter note, and then you've actually written or shaped the PNR index in terms of the shared responsibility. So thank you very much, Harry. And the last slide to say thank you once more to yourself, Harry, for the Transport Forum. And this vehicle has definitely been significant, and it has illustrated in every sense the theme for today of a shared responsibility, infrastructure, and maintenance. So we salute you, Harry, once more on behalf of SAAFF, and we say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Devil, and we salute you for a great presentation and spreading some light here on service reliability, which is key, and the one-stop work you guys are doing for the people, the traders, to engage with SARS and 14 government agencies. This is excellent work. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Devil, hopefully you're well with the panel discussion. We have to move on quickly because our next presenter, Jaap van der Merwe, must actually be in another meeting at 12. So Jaap, I'm not going to waste any more time. Jaap is a very well-known person in the rail industry in South Africa. He's a rail and port project manager, a project promoter and developer. And he can talk to us about development of a continental case study for low-cost rail track maintenance. Thank you, Jaap. We've been looking forward to this.
Thank you, Harry. Let me just share my screen. Hopefully you can see that coming up now.
Yes, slide view, then it's fine.
Yeah. Right. Thank you, everybody. Excellent morning so far. I have to be a bit quick. Juanita and I need to be on this OV call in a few minutes. And you can read this stuff further on. In the railway business, if you think of making a successful rail system, you have to start with capacity. So what one wants to do is to balance the theoretical capacity in that middle diagram against the reliability, and that sort of overlay area becomes what you can practically service in the market. And you can see on the right, Transnet criteria is anything from less than 60% of that capacity utilized, they call light. Once you go into 80, 95% heavy utilization, eventually you will have system failure, or what we would call a jam capacity, where you have a railway traffic jam. Now, with that in mind, where do we fit our rail market spaces? This is from the rail policy process. And you can see that as speed increases and as bearing of the axle load increases, the application changes. So light rail or trams, light and slow. On the very far right, not so heavy but very fast, is high-speed rail, everybody's dream. I think there's one in Morocco on the continent. And then our bread and butter in logistics in this country is top left, heavy haul. We run iron ore trains and coal trains, and then we would like to run heavy intermodal, but we can't double stack, so we have to run heavy long containers, and we all have general freight network. The narrow gauge family, of which our Cape gauge is one of them, sort of fits in that space. When you go outside that space, you have to go to a wider gauge because of stability measurements. Railways are self-funding when they hit about 10 million tons for every route kilometer that they have. And this is long-dated research, very well proven. If you compare South Africa with the rest of the planet, you will see that there's this magical $1 per net ton kilometer cost structure, which is a function of the engineering of the track and the locomotives and the way we operate trains. And we see South Africa just cuts it at about 8 to 11 million tons is sort of the safe zone at 8 million ton kilometers for every route kilometer, not track kilometer, every route kilometer. So you divide in South Africa by the 20,000, not the 30,000 kilometers. You'll see that we just make self-funding. Canada and the US, Russia, Japan, they are well below that line, and you can see Europe and so on, where there's really not much freight. It's mostly people move. These networks require subsidy. If you compare us, the world with, from a profitability point of view or operating ratio with the the American class ones, you'll see they all make about a EBITDA or operating ratio of about 57%, which means that they have, or 60%, they have about 40% of gross profit, before any of the EBITDA subtractions. That allows them to pay for themselves and also expand their business. So what we're trying to do is figure out how can Africa play in that space, because we all are very quick to run off to these standards and use their technologies, whether it's UIC, China, or American ARIMA standards for engineering. But when we switch it on, it doesn't work on the continent, and the problem is the density. So here's a good example. This is a work comparing the Central Economic Corridor in Nigeria against South Africa. And you can see on the left-hand side now is the profitability or the operating ratio. So if you are less than OR ratio less than 100%, you make money. If you're above 100%, you lose money. So you can see where the little red dot is, that is the break-even point. So this is hard data. Typically, anybody that is to the left of this curve needs subsidy of sorts, and everybody to the right of this break-even point are profitable. You can see, and I'll come to that case now, and this is the project we're currently working on the line from Abuja to the south in the middle. The target is how to get to 10 million tons. World best practices that you saw a bit later, Canadian National is the best. They say a ratio of 57% gives them a density of north of 20 million tons per every route kilometer. You can see where our heavy ore lines are. So that gives us an idea of what we need to do in Africa. We need to get more traffic so we can slide down that line so profitability goes up so we can be more sustainable. Or we need to do things differently in future. So here's sort of my little scorecard of colonial era and modernized railroads on the African continent. So if you look at, it's a busy slide, but you'll see it's the gauge, meter gauge in the meter gauge area in the past. It was that sort of slow, light axle load territory. We've pushed the Cape gauge into heavy ore now, and then modernized. Everybody that has been building new tracks been doing to standard gauge. Gautrain, Nigeria has built already to those corridors. Our folks in the Horn of Africa, others to Djibouti has built one. The Kenyans have built, and the Tanzanians are currently building. And if you look at the required traffic in colonial era, you would see those traffic to keep those things going was try to get north of 5 million tons per annum. South Africa on our general freight, our capacity was around 90 million tons that we installed. Practically, the colonial era lines that are still running all over Africa, sort of the 1 to 2 trains per day, except for the Resano Garcia Railway from Komatipoort to Maputo. Everybody else is sort of the 0.5 to 1.5 million tons in SADC per annum. So the Resano Garcia Railway looks good, sort of good. And then TFR used to be excellent, but we're sort of in the yellow band now, not the green band, 40 to 60 million tons. And if you look to the right, what was built, it was sort of typically 18-ton axle loads. We built to 20, and it was in Africa, the rest of Africa, a mix of 33 and 48 kilogram rails and steel wood, and here and there later on concrete sleepers. All dieselized except for Zimbabwe, and it was typically manual train authorizations or maybe track warrants, which is just a certificate to go from A to B. In South Africa, we use in South Africa we use track warrants and some CTC, and also down here. If you look at the quality of the network, you can see it's all in the red, except the BBR line in Zimbabwe is sort of and the local network are sort of in the 60% territory. If I have to guess how good it is. I'm not talking about the effect of vandalism, but that's just the reality of the track form. And then from service excellence, you could see there's not much to speak about. And currently, at our low GFB volumes, we're at 50%. If you look at the modernization, very interesting thing pops up. The Gautrain is designed for more than 100,000 people per annum. They're sort of at the 60,000 territory. It's light axle load because it's a rapid rail system, electrified, European train control system for signaling. Service excellence is good, as we all know. There's some issues with the network quality, which I didn't fill in. You can feel a few slacks when you ride on the track. It sort of jigs when you go over a few points. Nigeria is a sad story, 1 to 0. Some lines are closed because now of terrorism, and then 1 to 4 trains per day. It's all built to standard gauge, heavy capacity, dieselized, fancy China control systems, which is similar to the ETCS level 2. Network quality that they built recently is about at 50%. Service excellence doesn't exist. The line from Addis to Djibouti also built that same sort of trainer spec, and you remember the 10 million tons I showed you for break even and making your own way in the world, and 10,000 people a day. That's sort of the standard design that the Chinese built all railroads for. 1.5 trains per day, but at least it's modern technology. This one is electrified. You could see the network quality is fairly good. The service can be much better. For many reasons, mostly connectivity on the sides and also interoperability between the two countries. Mombasa, Naivasha, so it's Mombasa, Nairobi, Naivasha standard gauge. That's the so-called Madaraka Express in Kenya. Designed again for 10 million tons. They're trying to get to 5 million tons. They run about 8 trains per day, mostly passengers, diesel. It's actually a good service and it's a good network. And then they're still building in Dar es Salaam again to that 10 million tons per annum standard. So the common theme is the stuff we use, the business cases are sort of pitched around 10 million per annum. So there's one black swan, and it's a concession, Nakala Corridor, classic colonial era non-functional railroad, less than 1 million tons. It was a combination of the CFM networks in Mozambique, Corridor North, Desenvolvimento, and also Central East Africa Railways in Malawi. Then the World Bank concessioned it in the late 90s, just brought in a private owner, and they still stayed less than 2 million tons, got a little bit more traffic going. Americans took it, and then the magic happened. The Brazilians discovered coking coal in Tet, and they decided to connect the Tet coal fields to Malawi, creating traffic for it. So Vale put in a lot of money, and they got it to about 8 million tons. It cost them $7 billion, including the mine. They ran it like that for a number of years, and then last year the Indians, Jindal Group, bought out Vale, and they took it over, and literally within 6 months, they got 1 million tons extra run rate. In the second half last year, they got to 15 million tons, and they will be around 18 million tons later this year, and they've got a plan up to 24 million tons 2030. This is the only concession on the continent that is printing cash, and it is the only success story where an old colonial railway has been properly rehabilitated. It required the world's largest producer of iron ore and serious entrepreneurs and an exit process for this to evolve. So if you look at the life cycle of track forms, then you'll see this yellow curve is for ballasted track. And you can see after about 20, 22 years, there's a huge cost jump in track dollars per or euros per kilometer that you need to invest. And then you grow your maintenance cost, there's a little bump there. And every time you do this, you re-rail. This has to do with the fact that we have ballast and sleepers, and that we have a lot of fatigue in the rails between the sleepers, and the ballast gets fouled and you need to clean it up and so on. If you look at ballastless tracks, so that's the European slab track systems from Germany mostly, you'll see that it starts being more expensive because you have to cast the slab and it's got very fancy padding below it, but it's pretty much a flat rate, and the reason for that is you don't have this ballast maintenance that you need to do. If you look at the South African system, the tubular modular track system, what is special is it is all the properties of ballast track from slab track from Europe and then some, but the capex is the same as conventional track, so you don't have to pay this premium up front. It's very attractive, and it stays quite long. So the message is ballasted track with sleepers is your problem. And if you look all over Africa, you will see they're trying to deal with steel sleepers. They're trying to deal with wooden sleepers. They're trying to deal with concrete sleepers. But we keep making the same mistake of assuming that we have 10 million tons of traffic to run. So just to give you an idea, this is what the high-speed line looks between Paris and Strasbourg. You see I've marked where the rails are, the bearers, or the cross-tie sleepers they call it, and these are the systems I just discussed. the stones, lots of ballast stones, all the embankments you need to build to keep it at a certain gradient. You need cut-off drains if there's water coming down the mountain. You need cuttings to keep it flat. You need to get under bridges and grade separation. You need walkways where staff can go. You need communication ducts. You need overhead power if it's in masts and gantries if it is electrified. You need contact wires. This is the South African yard in Ermelo, the heavy oil yard for the coal line, showing this ballastless tubulus system. It's a concrete V drain in the middle. It's not part of the structure, it's like a gutter. And this thing takes since 2013, it's running on the sharpest curve if you go around this bend, for heavy oil in the world. It's on the steepest gradient for shunting for heavy oil in the world. And it does 100 million gross tons per annum. Now remember, we're trying to do 10 million tons a year. This thing does 10 years every year. Transnet chose to run it on a run-to-fail policy, so they put in zero maintenance, and it started failing at 1.6 billion, 1.6 thousand million gross tons, whereas ballasted track fails 8 times earlier, or 7 times earlier. So when you do regular maintenance and you would cost it to ballast the track, you'd be at 100% cost. This thing takes 30% of that cost. It's the same with slab track. And the capital cost is actually cheaper if you build enough of it. So what we're sitting with is an engineering paradigm that is not conventional. Now, if you see what it takes to maintain conventional track, you have to do this whole picture. Yeah? And there's a lot of work in the second column dealing just with the fact that you've got ballast. You need all of these machinery and do all of these sort of things to get the job done. And if you don't have them, you can't do the job. And part of the problem, even in South Africa, is we don't have these products in stock, I think. And then we're not even talking about, I think there's 3 rail grinding machines in the whole country. There's nothing almost to speak of north. And these are multi-million-dollar machines because of the nature of how we build tracks. So all of that cost structure and all of that profitability presumes you can afford to run a business big enough to afford this sort of maintenance regime. I'll just go to the next slide. So, sorry, I skipped one. If you continuously weld the rail, which we do, which you can't do in the rest of Africa, then you have to obviously manage a lot of buckling activities. And you also, as the rail wears from a fatigue point of view, especially with the back, the rail bends what it will bend on the back. Then you make sure that you continually grind, almost like otherwise it's those big jumps that you saw on the previous curve. Look at our train control systems. This is the sort of South African evolution from colonial era through to where they are now, through to where Gautrain is already. So this is freight rail on the left. Now look what happens, what it looks like in Kuala Lumpur or in Japan or in China. This center in China manages the entire high-speed rail network for 37,000 route kilometers from one building, from one office, with one team. This is the PRASA system in Belleville. So also the technologies with which you manage your trains, allows you to densify. This is the colonial era lever frames and mechanical signaling. South Africa still uses a lot of that. They've just announced a program to selectively move to electronic interlockings on the right. And it would allow us to run more trains so that we can density up, so that we can get to the point where you can afford the track. These systems aren't cheap. You can see track warrant control. You're sort of in $1,000 capex or capital investment per route kilometer. Color light signaling jumps you. There are the conventional systems that we see everywhere we go. It's $1.3 million per kilometer. And then the European system and the Americans, the new modern systems, it seems that the American system is about 10 times quicker to install. PTC and positive train control, and it is significantly cheaper, and you can overlay it as the other systems get stolen. So we'll have to look at that as well across the continent. But you only put these high density management systems in away from track warrant control if you have the traffic. So Harry, that was just a quick run through to show that the fact that we chose to build with literally rich country, OECD country developed technologies has created a massive cost problem for us, which we can't offset because it is so significant that the traffic is there, that the profitability exists, so you can afford technology. Now, and what is sad about our current situation with the migration to the standard gauge is we still haven't solved the traffic generation problem. And until even again, we built it just to a different gauge with new kit. But the Chinese will tell you every one of their specifications, 10 million tons, otherwise you can't afford the hardware. So unless we can get 10 million tons per route kilometer going across Africa, our railways will remain failing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Job. Can you switch on your camera for a second? People can see you.
That is a dangerous request, but I will make so. Can you see me?
Yeah, yes, we can see. I just want to stop the sharing here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Job. Thank you so much. Yeah, Job obviously have to rush after another meeting. She won't be available for questions and answers, I suppose. But thank you very much. And it's giving me lots of comfort to know that you're serving on this crisis committee, the Presidential Crisis Committee, and hopefully saying the right words there for us and putting us in the right direction in our country. This rail is playing such a major role in our GDP. And thank you for this important work and the good work you're doing in the proper research. And we look forward to seeing you, lots more of you with the forum in the future. Thank you so much. I think we've lost Job's signal there. Yeah, but Job, it seems that we've lost you. Yeah, I think it's load shedding. They have done something on the hours. I think it was load shedding that's done something there. But ladies and gents, yeah, thanks to Jaap then, let's have a look at our program as we getting to the end of our program, and we're going to have the questions and answers. And can I ask that all our panelists who are still on the call, if they can kindly do both, switch on their videos and unmute so that I can actually see them, you know, and then do a spotlight to their cameras. Thank you.
Just for another 5 minutes or so, but I have to leave at 15:15, please. This is an important meeting.
Thank you, Jaap. Yes, we know that. So thank you. We've lost you for a while, but fortunately you're back now. Let me see. Len, you still on the call? Let me see, Len. Right, Len, I don't know if Corinne is still on the call. Let me just see. Corinne, I know she's...
Hi, Harry. I'm standing in for Corinne, just for the panel discussion.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Patsy. Yeah. Ladies and gents, you're welcome to now unmute yourself and then ask questions when I recognize you to the panelists. You can ask a question to a member of the panel or to the panel as a whole. I see there was one question in the chat room that's not been addressed, and there's somebody asked, you know, what's the process in this crisis committee? Where is it going, and what's the process? I don't know. Yeah, maybe you can just give some feedback on that.
Yeah, that's the call I'm about to join. Yeah, so what has happened for everybody is that the cabinet has formed let's call it a special cabinet subcommittee called the National Logistics Crisis Committee, which will form the umbrella. It's really the transportation cluster with a special hat on, and chaired by the president. And this committee will oversee the rollout of the what we call the logistics roadmap, which will be similar construct as the ESCOM liberalization roadmap. And then that committee will have a technical committee reporting to it. which will then have multiple work streams, of which Vulindlela runs the secretariat. I'm on the Vulindlela team. And the idea is that we then go corridor by corridor and see where we can assist. There's a resource mobilization fund that Business Unity South Africa has put together, and therefore they are part of these committees. And it's the first time, you know, a coalition of the willing and of economic optimists, because none of us can afford for this to carry on as it does. So where we are now is we're finalizing the TOR, so that it has to go through some governance process. I guess it needs cabinet approval, and I guess it needs maybe a gazetting of sorts under some act. I'm not sure how that process works. And that will happen at the rate of knots. You know, there's no time to waste. And then we can publish the roadmap document in the next week or three. And then, yeah, then it's all hands on deck, and we start working and fixing what we can. So there will be emergency recovery program of what is, and then obviously the long-term reform. So hopefully we will not need to appoint a Minister of Railways, but I think we can maybe get many things right. Hope that helps.
It's helping a lot, yeah. Thank you very much. So there's a lot of good
and I'm not volunteering for any ministerial jobs.
Private sector and government is definitely coming closer to each other, and definitely good things are happening in the background that not everybody is necessarily aware of. So this is good news. Thank you for sharing that. I'm just looking if there's anybody who's got a question. I think people are stunned or they're hungry. One of the two. Let me see. Blessing, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, it's not a question, but it's a much appreciation for the work and for joining me in that meeting. I really appreciate for everything. I'm here from Zimbabwe, starting from 9 o'clock. I was there in a meeting, but I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot. And I really appreciate for everyone. I hope he enjoyed or she enjoyed everything, but I much appreciate. Thank you very much for joining me in that meeting. I really appreciate for everything. Thanks.
Thanks, Blessing, for the kind words, and thanks for joining from all the way from Zimbabwe. Appreciate it. All right. Doesn't seem to me there are any questions on this stage. I think what we can do then is let's conclude in our session by closing remarks from our panelists. And I'll start with Jaap, and then we're going to Batsy, and then to Glenn, and then Devlin, if you can close the session for us. And then from the Transport Forum side as well, you know, thank you for hosting us today. We really appreciate it. So if we go to Jaap, then Batsy, and then Glenn, and then Devlin, if you can close the session for us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for Landiwe, who's asked the question, what happened in India? It's one of those tragic, almost perfect storms. We have this cheese, all the slices. What happened is there was a signal fault. It could have been a stone in the turnout or anything, who knows. The train derailed, and as the train derailed, it fell onto the line of track, or the rail gauge of the incoming track, and then the train lying on its side was hit by the freight train, and then another train went into that. So it's a big tragedy, and we feel very sad for the huge loss of life and the negative impact it has. But bear in mind, they run 12,000 trains a day in India, of which about 8,000 are passenger trains and 6,000 are freight trains, and so it's a massive operation. They've had an accident like this around 2000, the previous one 1981. So, and notwithstanding a very rickety rail system, bar the new dedicated freight corridors and the new metros, it's actually quite amazing that it is such a safe system overall. Now, so just in closing comments, I think I want to encourage everybody to, just stay the course. We're going to pull the ship right. There's some fantastic knowledge all around. The sort of work that SAAFF does is very good, and everybody else from industry which has not had the opportunity to speak today, we are privileged to hear them speak on a weekly basis from where I sit. And we must just now, just what is really willing, the coalition of the willing, fit, willing and able, step forward, put up your hand, there's a contribution all of us can make within our own space. And no matter how small, it is a very significant thing to do. We can't afford to have a logistics blackout, and we're very close to that. And you don't see that like the lights going out. You just see it that stuff start moving, or the shops become so expensive that people start buying. So that's not something we foresee for us in the future. What I find sadly traveling a lot in Africa now is, whereas in the past we were the big brother they looked up to learn the good lessons from, now they're learning from us the mistakes we've made. At least we are still in a position to share some knowledge. And then my last point, Harry, is we haven't touched on the AFT-CTFA, that free trade agreement, the free trade area. I think that is the trade secret. We are 1.3 billion people on this continent. We're the largest continent on the planet. We're not talking to each other. We're so busy doing business with everybody else, we don't do business with each other. And I think it'll work if the trade facilitation, the one-stop border post, the single windows, the port integration, the rail and the road come to the fore. And sadly so, rail is lagging very far behind, and therefore we have a very costly process to integrate logistics across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaap. Really appreciate your input. And
can I be excused, please, Harry?
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you, Jaap.
Thank you very much. Sorry to leave, but thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Batsy, closing comments.
Thanks, Harry. With everything happening in the country, such forums, they give me hope. There's always positive discussions. The contributions are always interesting, and there's something that we should take forward. So on behalf of Pegasus, thank you so much for the opportunity, and on behalf of Corinne from the Mobility Department of the Western Cape Government, we appreciate just the time and a chance just to share our thoughts. There's a lot of work happening in the background, and we hope to be back again with other topics that we will discuss. So yeah, thanks again for the opportunity, and thanks everyone.
Thank you, Batsy. Thank you, Pegasus. Really appreciate your inputs. Thank you so much. Glenn.
Oh, thanks, Harry. I think, can you hear me, Harry?
Yes, we can.
It seems almost like different mine shafts of precious minerals being unearthed. These different dashboards, for example, the single window and the logistics work that we're doing. And I'm just hoping that at some stage we can stitch it together. So the fruit exporters have shared with me they're doing very similar work, just focusing on the different commodities and how they are shipped every week. So we're almost at the cusp of bringing all of this together and developing a end-to-end dashboard with layers of detail. And then I think what one can hope for is that more data analytic capability could be deployed to this, so that we understand some of the correlations between the different variables, and we start managing them more proactively to improve fluidity in our logistics chains and unlock the potential that it holds for economic growth and job creation, so that everyone benefits, whether you a business person needing higher turnover and more margin, or whether you're a person needing a job and skills to move up your own career path. I think there would be a space for everyone. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you, Glenn, for that wise words. And thank you for the good work you're doing and sharing that knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. See you in Cape Town next week.
Sure, welcome.
Thanks, Glenn. Evelyn, our host for today from SAAFF, would you please close the session for us? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Harry, once more. And thank you to the panelists, Batsarai, Corinne, Glenn, and Jaap. An illustrious panel indeed. And today's session has been yet another successful edition of the Transport Forum, focusing on key topics, not just as a discussion, but also as a point of implementation and as a catalyst to conduct the work that needs to go forward in terms of stitching the supply chain and looking at it holistically, that yes, we wear different hats and yes, we have different responsibilities. But what unites us is this vehicle, the transport forum, in which we are able to demonstrate the next steps to execute our mandate to enhance and harness the shared responsibility, shared maintenance, and shared infrastructure. If it is to be, it is up to us. SA Inc. is dependent on our collective effort. So let's continue after this discussion and take it forward. And our sincere appreciation once more to all of the sponsors of the Transport Forum and to Mr. Harry van Heestien as an exemplary custodian that has had, as mentioned earlier, the foresight to ensure that we deliver this product some 16 years ago, because I think it was destined for a moment like this. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Devlin. Take care, guys.